Good morning. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you all to Cal State San Marcos. I am Dr. Patricia Prado Olmos, the Vice President of Community Engagement here at CSUSM, and I am honored to once again serve as MC for this great conference and to welcome you to our beautiful campus that sits on the ancestral lands of the Liceño people. Today, we are nearly 300 strong. It is our largest Southern California Women's Leadership Forum to date. And we are fortunate to have many distinguished guests with us today. Would the chancellors, trustees, and presidents please rise so we may acknowledge you and thank you for joining us today. And I also believe we have a number of the ACE fellows with us today. Please rise so we may acknowledge you as well. Many of us return to the ACE Annual Forum year after year, and we are sitting here now with full knowledge of the invaluable insights and connections that lie ahead. Others are joining us for the first time. Whether it is your 8th time or your first time, I am confident this is the best time to be here. I said this last year, and unfortunately I'm compelled to say it again this year. When each day brings something new in our national dialogue, something different, something potentially hurtful, some other kind of injustice, and disappointing displays of privilege, it is particularly uplifting and restorative to be among dedicated and caring colleagues with a common mission to better the future. As you can see from the printed program in your packets, our agenda today will not disappoint. Through the lens of today's theme, Together We Rise, we will enjoy a compelling keynote presentation by Republican strategist and political commentator Ana Nevado, hold our signature fireside chat with 3 distinguished presidents, and vision the future of this regional network over a working lunch. I'd like to address a few housekeeping items. Please note, if you haven't already located them, the restrooms are outside of the ballroom and off to the right. To be kind to our speakers and your fellow forum attendees, may I please ask you to double check that you have silenced your cell phones and other electronic devices. We do encourage you to take your photos and tweet your experience today at #SoCalAWN2018. Help spread the word about the forum and our network. So let's get started. It is my distinct pleasure to invite to the podium the presidential sponsor for the ACE Women's Network Southern California, CSUSM President, Dr. Karen Haynes. We gather today because 13 years ago, President Haynes reinvigorated the Southern California ACE Women's Network. President Haynes is the most senior president in the 23-campus California State University system. She is the first woman to hold this position of distinction. And while you can read more extensively about her professional accomplishments in your program, including her recent Social Work Pioneer Award from the National Association of Social Workers, I would be remiss if I did not share with you my personal knowledge of how President Haynes embodies the mission of the ACE Women's Network. President Haynes, day after day, works tirelessly to move the needle for women in higher education. She has created an exemplary campus culture, one of which I am proud to be a part. This campus culture helps women to thrive and advance to the highest levels of leadership. It is an honor to present to you the woman who has positively impacted my career in countless ways and is my boss, CSUSM's longest-serving president and our network's presidential sponsor, President Karen Haynes.
Good morning and welcome, or welcome back, to Cal State San Marcos. You know I'm always so delighted to host and to be with such a large group of talented women in higher education. This year's forum, our 8th annual conference, carries special significance for me as it is my last as the presidential sponsor. However, the important work being done by the ACE Women's Network, Southern California, will continue. I am pleased to share that the next presidential sponsor of the ACE Women's Network, Southern California, will be my dear colleague, Dr. Soraya Coley, president of Cal Poly Pomona. Soraya's passion, relational skills, strategic ability undoubtedly will aid our efforts to advance women's leadership on campuses across the nation. I have known and worked with Soraya for years on system-wide commissions before she became Cal Poly Pomona's president in January 2015. She also cares about and commits to the importance of reaching back to assure others an easier path forward. So I was going to say, Soraya, please stand. So please stand again. Let me personally thank you and receive the warm welcome from this group to help move the needle. As all of you, I'm sure, know, I will be retiring as Cal State San Marcos' president at the end of this June. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to lead this unique and special institution since 2004. Announcing my retirement has also provided an opportunity to reflect on 4 decades in higher education, including 24 years as a university president. I still recall my first job interviews, which consistently included questions like, are you married? Do you plan to have children, and if so, how soon? Does your husband approve of your working? This was in the early 70s, all right, so that's a factor, but a time when there wasn't any advice for women on how to handle, nor any legislation to forbid those questions, such irrelevant, disrespectful interview questions. And while I am pleased that we have come a long way since that time, we all know our work is certainly not done. Not even close. That's why organizations like ACE Women's Network are so critical. They bring us together around common commitment to education and to developing new women leaders. They allow us to speak openly about our achievements and challenges while providing a forum for sharing personal stories and struggles and best practices. The theme of this year's forum, Together We Rise, is certainly an appropriate one. I believe strongly in the power and importance of us coming together, both figuratively and literally, to increase the cracks in that glass ceiling, to commit to ensuring that there are more women at the top everywhere. I know it will continue to take our unified efforts to eventually break that glass ceiling. And in looking around this room, I see trusted advisors, colleagues, friends, protégés, women who are passionate, capable, successful, who know or are already leading and ready to lead with purpose, with confidence. It is inspiring to join you in our shared commitment to higher education and to developing and advancing more women leaders. I'm pleased that under Chancellor White's leadership, thank you, Chancellor White, the CSU is at the forefront of gender equity for campus presidents. Last night, some of you were with us for a wonderful celebration that marked a milestone of the CSU having 12 of its 23 presidents women, more than 50%, the nation's highest percentage, while ACE still, yes. While ACE's needle still seems stuck at 30%. That's quite a change in the CSU from when I was appointed in 2004, the first time in the CSU history that there were 4 women presidents. Unfortunately, our progress has not yet been duplicated across the country, ACE having yet only 30% of women. The ACE move the needle target, as you know, is to have parity by the year 2030. We all in this room know the importance of students seeing people who look like them in leadership positions, and we all know that the majority of university and college students in this nation is female. As a first-generation student, I was at Goucher, a women's college, and my eyes were opened at that time to the possibilities that existed for women because, although it was the 1960s, there were women at a women's college who were deans, who were department chairs, who were professors. I had no idea at that time the difficulties and impediments that those women must have faced to obtain those positions. As a university president for 24 years now and an academic team for 10 before that, I am well acquainted with the challenges these women must have faced, and it certainly has faced me and many of you in this room. That is why we as women must be intentional about opening doors for other women whenever we can, wherever we can, demonstrating for each other and for our male colleagues and bosses that we can and do lead with integrity, strength, independence, and resolve. We must show that as women leaders, we possess a unique set of experiences and perspectives that differentiate us from many of our male leaders, that we bring a different approach to problem solving, more open in the way we make decisions, and that we often are more willing to reach across traditional boundaries to forge solutions. To promote change means that women must sit at the table, not on the sidelines. We must speak up and sometimes over our male counterparts. There will always be those who don't listen, who discount our opinions, who say that we should sit back and wait our turn. We have waited long enough. The presence or absence of women academic leaders has far-reaching influences on our universities and the future generations. There are talented women at universities across the country, and they deserve, as you in this room do, attention, support, consideration. It is not sufficient for educational institutions or any of us to support the status quo, invoke historical explanations for the situation, or bemoan the difficulty of changing cultural norms. Many of us have pushed the glass ceiling higher, and as we climb up one rung and then the next, we can and do thrive as leaders. And so doing so while staying true to who we are, by being bold and authentic. We are powerful allies for each other. I know I will continue to do my part, to keep walking the talk, to keep climbing the ladder, to keep reaching back and reaching a hand back to those behind me. When it comes to the future of higher education, for us and for the next generation of women leaders, our time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Haynes, for that warm welcome and for providing such an inspirational launch for the day ahead. It is now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker. Ana Nevado is an American political strategist and commentator and a leading Hispanic Republican political voice. Born in Nicaragua, Ana immigrated to the U.S. in 1980 at age 8. Ana has a vast experience in supporting losing but principled Republican candidates. She was the National Hispanic Co-Chair for John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign and for Governor John Huntsman's presidential campaign. Ana is a political commentator on CNN, ABC, and Telemundo. She is known for her honest and blunt commentary and speaking truth to power, often with humor or attempts at humor. I have a feeling her keynote address may contain some of this blunt commentary and humor. You can read more about Ana in your programs. Please join me in welcoming Ana Nevado.
So yeah, that's my bio, losing Republican candidates. But at least they didn't grab anybody anywhere. It's a low bar. So thank you so much for having me here. For the few men in the room, Chancellor, and are there any other brave souls, like in the back? I'm sorry, because I'm going to beat up on you guys tonight. Just a little bit. I'm having like, a Marco Rubio moment. So I was asked today by Regina, who I cannot believe is Cuban with that name and that red hair, but okay. Which goes to show you, do not judge a book by its cover. Just ask Elizabeth Warren. I was asked to speak to you this morning less about politics and more about my journey, my life and work balance, which I don't do very well, and about the meaning of diversity. She wanted me to speak for an hour, and I said, look, I can't stand hearing myself drone on for an hour. So I'm going to give some remarks about that, what she asked me to speak about, and then open it up for questions. I think there's mics around the tables. And really, I'm an open book. Anything you want to ask me about, including my fluctuating weight, for which I also blame Trump, is up for discussion. I don't, you want to know about Whoopi Goldberg, you want to know about Joe Behar, you want to know if Chris Cuomo really is that hot, you can ask me anything you want. You do, don't you? All right, so diversity is something I learned about later on in life. I grew up in Miami, as did Regina, and it's a city with a lot of Hispanics. So many, and in so many leadership positions that you live within a bubble in Miami. Hispanics sometimes forget we are actually a minority in this country. It's like we haven't read the memo in our inbox that we are a minority. I was born in a very small town in Nicaragua in 1971, and I had a magical early childhood. I won the ovarian lottery. I was gifted with parents who adored me and doted on me and spoiled me. I was the last of 4 children, and there was about 8 years between me and my closest brother, so I was a spoiled brat from day one. That fairy tale came to an end. Nicaragua, which had been ruled by a right-wing dictator, went through a civil war, which culminated in a communist revolution in 1979. And when you live through civil war and become a political refugee as a child, you learn very early in life that being informed, being engaged, participating matters. You learn very early in life not to take freedom and democracy for granted. And so there are a few things as I was thinking about what to talk to you guys about today that I think have really shaped my life. All of us, we are who we are plus our experiences. For me, one of the things that has shaped my life is having a severely disabled, severely autistic brother. I think it's made me more compassionate. I think it's made me an advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves. I think it's made me angry at those who take advantage of people who cannot fend for themselves. And it's one of the reasons why I could not support Donald Trump. Because when I saw him mock a disabled reporter, that was my brother he was mocking. I grew up watching children mock my brother. I had never seen an adult do it, much less one that wanted to be the leader of the free world. Something else that has shaped my life, and this is a good exercise for everybody. I think you guys should go home and think, okay, if I was going to get in front of 300 women, by the way, you all look so pretty, and you all look so good. I feel so underdressed. And, but if I was going to speak in front of 300 women and talk about my story, what are the salient moments and items in my life that have shaped me and made a difference in who I am? Another moment for me was the death of my older brother. And he died at 38, about 16 or 17 years ago. I was talking to Whoopi Goldberg about this earlier this week. It was her brother passed away, and it was her brother's birthday. this week. And, there's something about birthdays and there's something about certain times of the year that just kind of make it worse. But for me, the positive result of my brother dying so early is that it taught me that you just can't plan in life. Life is so fleeting. Life is so fragile. And for me, it gave me this thirst to want to live it intensely and want to live it joyfully and want to find happy things in the things that I do. I'm too fat, rich, and happy to do shit that doesn't make me happy. And I think I owe it to my brother. Because, sometimes when you're 30 years old, you think, oh, I've got all my life ahead of me. When you're 40 years old, oh, I got all my life ahead of me. Now, when white hairs start coming out on your chin, you're like, shit, maybe I don't have all my life ahead of me. I'm there. Something, 2016 was a life-changing moment for me. And, when you're a political hack, when you're a political operative, you wake up practically every day to an inbox of media talking points and guidance points, and when something happens, there's emergency calls for friends and surrogates on how to respond. And it's your friends who are running as the candidates, and it's your friends who are running the campaigns, so you're part of them and you're working. And so you've got to stick to the script, because if not, they'll taser you. I know, because it happened to me. And, in 2016, after beginning the Republican primary supporting Jeb Bush, and then I went and I supported Chris Christie and Marco Rubio. I got so desperate I even supported Ted Cruz when he was the only one left. I would have supported a potted plant over Donald Trump. In fact, some may argue supporting Jeb Bush is supporting a potted plant. A tall one. And, so I wasn't, when Donald Trump became the Republican nominee, it was the first time in my adult life I wasn't part of a campaign. I wasn't aligned with a campaign. I was out there. And I wasn't receiving talking points. I wasn't receiving anything from the RNC or the DNC or the Hillary campaign or the Trump campaign or anybody. And it forced me for the first time in my adult life. It was actually, in a way, a blessing in disguise for me. It was a hell of a curse for the rest of the country. But because it forced me to think about what was happening, to assimilate it, to process it, and to talk about it in my own voice without a filter. I was unplugged, unmuzzled, unhinged, on everything. So the last thing Regina asked me to talk about was work-life balance. I think work-life balance is something we need to constantly think about it. And by the way, we think about it, believe me, men don't. But there's a lot of things they don't think about, What can we do? But, I don't know that we will ever be happy with the work-life balance. I don't know that we will ever really feel like we achieve it, because that's how we are as women. We're always, if you think you got it, you're trying for more. You're trying to lean in, lean out. Look, I just think you have to define for yourselves what work-life balance is and what works for you. Not let yourself be influenced by what other people are doing. I hated that book, Lean In, because what if I want to lean out and sit in a chair and drink mint juleps all day? I think a lot of times women are harshest on themselves, and we are each other's harshest judges. And we are the ones that set very difficult expectations for ourselves. And so, on the work-life balance, work at it, aspire to it, but don't beat yourself up over it. You know that sweet spot when you're there and you're not. When you're not achieving it, like me. So, I immigrated to Miami in 1980 as an 8-year-old. Actually, I fled to Miami. My parents put me in the Sacred Heart. It was an all-girls Catholic school. So I grew up surrounded by Sacred Heart nuns. All the good things I know in life, I got taught by the Sacred Heart nuns. All the bad things I know in life, I got taught by Cuban men and politicians. And I grew up thinking women could do anything. Women could achieve anything. Women had a right to an opinion. Women could be affirmative. Women could be loud and proud and have no shame and, feel no qualms about exerting themselves and flexing their muscle and talking about their opinions. And again, that goes to kind of the little bubble that I lived in when it came to being a woman and being a Hispanic. I thought we owned the world. Lo and behold, we didn't. And, everyone I grew up with had somewhat of a similar story. It's ironic. Miami is considered a very diverse city, but I actually had to leave Miami to really understand diversity. As a young law student, I found myself in Washington advocating for the passage of immigration legislation to help Nicaraguans and other Central Americans. As I started being part of this bigger Latino movement, I found myself on a panel one day of prominent Latino leaders. And, I think they desperately were looking for a Republican to put on a panel, and I was the token Republican, which is fine. Being the token is okay every now and then. And, so the moderator asked everybody if they remembered the first time they felt discriminated. If I say that to you guys, do you guys remember the first time you felt discriminated because you were a woman or because you were Hispanic, because you were African American or whatever you may be? And so each one of them was going through really poignant, heart-wrenching stories. Some of them were from the schoolyard. Some of them were from hearing a slur against Hispanics for the first time as little kids. And I'm sitting there as the last person on the panel, my palms are sweating. I can't think of anything. I'm about to make up a story, a telenovela, and go in real good. And it finally got to me, and I said the truth, which is, look, I'm a woman. I'm Hispanic. I'm an immigrant. I speak with an accent. I'm a lot of times the youngest person in the room, and I'm chubby. The likelihood I've been discriminated is huge, but I'm so damn arrogant, I don't acknowledge it. And, and that's easier said than done sometimes, and I realize that. But I think, I really think that when you feel discriminated, when you feel somebody's putting you down, when you feel you're getting passed up, it's, don't internalize it as a problem of yours. It's a problem of theirs. And hold them accountable for it. And just, to me, if you want to make it as a woman, if you want to make it as a woman of color, you just got to have a very thick skin and know that that's what comes with it. But it also comes with a lot of positives. That, to me, is why, I became very aware of the meaning of diversity when I was a fellow at Harvard's Institute of Politics. It's a great thing I got there as an adult because my parents could have donated a wing and I would not have made it out of high school. And, I got there and you would put sign-up sheets outside of your office for students to sign up to see you during office hours. And, my other colleagues had like 4 students that would sign up. I had students signing up the front of the sheet, the back of the sheet. I was there for hours. I had to bring in energy bars. And it was because there weren't Hispanics. There weren't people of color. There weren't, I was getting a line of Latinos who were in Harvard and African Americans who were in Harvard and LGBTQ. For some reason, people, I'm like there's like a gay man dying to come out of me. And in Harvard, they don't have what you guys have here. In Harvard, for all of its ivy and all of its history and all of its everything, there are precious few Hispanics in leadership positions. There are precious few people who look like me and sound like me can go and see and feel that they're identifying with them. That's why having a Sonia Sotomayor in the Supreme Court matters so much. That's why having a Barack Obama who can lean over so the little black boy can touch his hair and know that it feels just like his matters so much. Because it sends a message to little boys and little girls of all colors and ethnicities and creeds that they can do anything and be anything in life. And just think about the last few weeks and what the lack of diversity can mean, the message it can send. There was not one woman among the Republicans in the Judiciary Committee during the Kavanaugh hearings. That's an issue that tore our country apart. It was very much a Mars versus Venus issue. And there was not one Republican woman to speak about what women all over the country were feeling and share it with their colleagues. Kick them. To me, diversity is much more than skin deep or gender or ethnicity. If you ask me today to define the worst problem facing America, I would say it's our inability to embrace diversity of thought. Too often we stick to our comfort zones. We listen to and watch and read things that we agree with, that reaffirm our beliefs. Too many of us exist in echo chambers where everyone talks like us and consumes news like us and thinks like us. We've lost the ability to with what other people bring, different stories, different experiences. So if there's something I would encourage you to do is to get out of your comfort zone. I was having this conversation with Wanda Sykes the other day. Do you guys know who Wanda is? And so, Wanda said to me, white people need black friends. And I said, yes, and black people need white friends. And she said, nah. I tell my black friends to start off slowly, maybe a Puerto Rican. Stretch your legs. But before I get into the, meat of the meaning of diversity and what it's meant to me, let's talk about what diversity actually is. For most of us, for most people out there, diversity is about people of different backgrounds and colors and creeds and all of that, ages. But too often, it's just about checking off a box, right? Having a table and having around that table an African American, check, a Hispanic, check, a woman, check, an LGBTQ, check, an Asian, check, whatever, check. You see, it's not enough to get around the table when you are a woman or when you are a minority or when you are LGBTQ and then not have the guts to represent and shake the boat and speak up when you have to. Because you got to that table on the backs of a hell of a lot of people that came before you. And I think that when you're part of a community like we are, you've got a duty to represent. The fact that you're there, you're not there just because of what we embody. I often get asked what it feels like to be a Latino on TV and be called on to speak about issues like immigration and the DREAM Act, issues that are considered Latino issues. But let me ask you, if the people with the most skin in the game, if the people who have experienced it in their own skin are not the ones talking about it, who do you want talking about the DREAM Act and immigration? Jeffrey Lord? So yes, I want to be talked about. I want to be called on to talk about the DREAM Act. I was brought to this country at the age of 8. I was lucky. My parents had resources. My parents had visas. My parents could put me in a private school and keep me here on a student visa. But even if they had not, they would have brought me out of communism. They would have wanted to raise me in freedom. And that was not my decision. It was not my action. It was not my money. It was not, I had nothing to do with what happened. And so, I know that, but for the grace of God, I would be a DREAM Act kid too, living in the angst and the fear and the distress that those kids are living in today. And, for the life of me, I can't understand. So, I have no qualms about getting up and talking about my personal story and why I feel so passionately on issues like immigration, because I just don't understand, maybe it's me, but I just don't understand how you can be an immigrant or a child of an immigrant, be an elected official with power, and not do anything to improve, to end the fear and the angst of other immigrants like you. And yes, I'm talking about Rafael Ted Cruz and little Marco. Like I dream of a day when Latinos and African Americans and women or any other group, as you want to label it, can just be, right? Like white men, they can just be. They don't have to be worrying about, what does this mean for women, obviously? What does this mean for, black people? What does this mean for brown people? They can just be, as opposed to having the burden of representing, of doing more and being part of a community. And I dream of a day when African Americans, Latinos, women can just be and don't have the responsibility of fighting for the interests of a particular community. But we're far away from a day like that. For me today, the meaning of diversity is tied to the word unity. There are many communities that feel under attack today, that are afraid, and we must realize that, and we must stand together. We must stand with each other and fight for each other. Because look, calling Mexicans rapists and criminals is an attack on all of us. Questioning a US-born judge's ability to do their job because his parents were Mexican immigrants is an attack on all of us. Making fun of a disabled person is an attack on all of us. Equating neo-Nazis and white supremacists to those that protest against them is an attack on all of them. Pardoning Joe Arpaio, who perpetrated racial profiling, is an attack on all of us. Conducting ICE raids in churches is an attack on all of us. Ending DACA and then not doing a damn thing to fix it for over a year is an attack on all of us. Treating Puerto Ricans like second-class citizens in the wake of a deadly storm is an attack on all of us. Tearing good, decent parents away from small children is an attack on all of us. Putting little children in cages is an attack on all of us. Denying the deaths of 3,000 Puerto Ricans is an attack on all of us. Calling the cops on African Americans sleeping in their own school library or waiting at Starbucks or selling lemonade is an attack on all of us. Even if you have all your needs taken care of, even if you're going to be okay, if core American values of unity and equality and fairness and basic decency are under attack, we are all under attack. When immigrants are demonized, we're all being demonized. Everybody that looks and sounds like an immigrant, well, except a certain Slovenian supermodel. You know what they say, there are some jobs only immigrants will do. When gays are beaten up by homophobes, when African Americans are put in jail for years and years for the same crimes that whites serve no time for, when women are sexually assaulted and the perpetrators get away with it, that is an attack on all of us. So we have two choices. We can either ignore what's going on all around us, ignore the human suffering, the distress, the fear and despair of our communities, or we can fight back. And look, you guys are here today because you want to be part of representing and fighting back and being part of a bigger movement. Ignorant bliss is not an option. We must fight back hard and we must fight back together. The one silver lining for me of the last 2 years is that something that had been asleep in America has awoken. I think we've gotten a little too complacent with the rights and responsibilities and duties that come with living in America, with living in a democracy. The American spirit to defend our values, to defend the things that unite us, it has awoken and is alive. And each and every one of you, that's why you're here this morning. We saw it in the millions of women who marched in Washington and across the country the day after the swearing in. I mean, I had friends who had never picked up a needle in their lives, so all of a sudden were churning out pussy hats for everybody they knew. They looked ugly. We saw it in the thousands of people who showed up at airports to protest the Muslim ban. We see it in the black athletes who take a knee, even knowing they will face fines and repercussions. We saw it in the black women of Alabama who voted en masse so their state would not be represented in the US Senate by an alleged pedophile. We see it in the women and men saying enough is enough through the Me Too movement. We see it in the students of Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, Florida, who fearlessly speak truth to power and demand to be able to go to school without fearing that they will be shot and killed. We see it in the crowds that have braved the scorching sun and heat to protest against children being separated from their parents. We saw it in Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who knew she'd be attacked and harassed and put through the shredder, but came forward to tell her truth anyways, not for her, but for us. We saw it in the two Latinas who cornered Jeff Flake in an elevator. They had to be Latinas. I know he must have thought, damn, I should have taken the stairs. And demanded that he look their grief and trauma in the face as he was headed for the vote. We see it in the wave of candidates, many of them people of color or women or LGBTQ, first-time candidates who are running and winning. We must claim our country back because whether some like it or not, whether some deny it or not, whether the President of the United States himself acknowledges it or not, this is our country as much as anybody else's. Each one of us is as American as the descendants of those who came on the Mayflower. I was going to make some sort of Elizabeth Warren Native American joke here, but it's escaping me. Actually, let me talk about that. I'm going to digress a little. So last year, after the election, whenever the hell that was, I've gone through a lot of therapy and electric shock to forget the exact dates. But I get an email from Henry Louis Gates, Dr. Skip Gates from Harvard. Do any of you know who he is? So he's the host of Finding Your Roots, which is a very successful show on PBS that traces people's roots. And Skip sends me this email saying, I want to do a segment on my show about you. And I say, yes, 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 because my father is obsessed. He thinks he descends from Spanish royalty. And any Hispanic with 2 dimes to rub together think they come from a marquee somewhere. So Skip sends me this email with like this exhaustive questionnaire asking me everything you can possibly imagine about me, about my parents, about my grandparents, I mean, as far as my memory could go. And I send back everything. And I don't hear a peep for about 2 weeks. And I turn around to my boyfriend and I say, oh shit, I think I just sent all my information to the Russians. And so I send him an email and I say, for the love of God, please tell me you are Skip Gates and not some Russian, sitting in Leningrad sending. And so he did my DNA, I did the show, and instead of Spanish royalty, I wound up being the descendant of slaves, which is really funny because my dad had come up from Nicaragua to hear about his royal lineage, and he doesn't speak English very well, and I'm in the middle of this set with Skip, and we've got black piping like this all around us, and my father is on the other side with a little hearing thing, hearing what's going on the set. And we come to the point where it's like, please turn the page, and there is this, free African slave from Costa Rica that I descend from. And I literally hear my father go, ¿Qué? And we, completely ruined the moment on camera. And then it's funny because when the thing ended, and I was telling Skip, oh my God, my father, you got no idea. So Skip goes and puts his hand next to my father, and they're the same goddamn color. So anyways, it's, but my point about that I was thinking, and I was thinking about it in the midst of this entire Elizabeth Warren controversy. And by the way, girlfriend could have waited 3 weeks until after the election to distract us with something like that. I mean, it's not like she's going to be more Native American in 3 weeks than she is now. But, so I ended up being 4% African. And here's the thing, I'm very proud of that. I even cried on camera and all of that. I'm very, very proud of that. But I can't go and check off some box and pretend that I've had an African-American experience. And I can't go and take the position of somebody, because I haven't lived it, right? I haven't, in the same way that other people have not lived the Latino experience. But it also reminded me that when you look at somebody, I was talking about this to Wanda as well. Wanda descends from white people. And I'm like, man, you come from white people and I come from black people. what is wrong with this picture? And I think it teaches you so much about just how much diversity is within each of us, and not to really be so hung up on labels sometimes, because there's much more to your history than you may ever imagine. Donald Trump, not Latino or black. So we must lead, we must get loud, we must speak for those that are too afraid to speak. We must fight for the dreamers and the little children who are yet to be reunited with their parents. We must fight back for the Puerto Rican woman who gets assaulted for wearing a shirt with the flag, or the women who get detained in Montana for speaking Spanish, or the African American little girl who gets bawled out because she's selling lemonade on a street corner, or the women in New York, out of all places, New York City, who get screamed at and berated by a crazy racist for speaking Spanish. We must denounce injustice everywhere we see it. And that includes standing up for people who don't look like us and who may not be part of our traditional community, because we want them to stand up for us. And I want to end with a call to action, and then we can talk about anything you guys want. But, where we are today, 20 days from an election, inaction in the face of injustice is not an option. Fear is not an option. Indifference is not an option. Silence is not an option. We must channel all these things we're feeling, angst and anger and frustration, channel it into votes. It is the vehicle we have in America to make a difference and to bring about change. That's why, I'm so disappointed sometimes, because for years and years and years I've heard about how the Latino vote or the African American vote can make or break an election. It's a sleeping giant, people call it often. Yeah, well, guys, it's time we wake up from the siesta. So, if after the Kavanaugh vote you felt disappointed, don't be disappointed, vote. Don't be discouraged, vote. Don't cry, vote. Don't eat Haagen-Dazs, vote. Because that is the one vehicle in America we have to make a difference. And so with that, I'm done. Where are the mics? All right, so you guys could really ask me whatever the hell's on your mind. I will answer truthfully and bluntly.
Wonderful, wonderful comments. My name is Patricia Riley. I'm Director of Veteran Services here at Cal State San Marcos, and I'm a Navy veteran, like John McCain was. And I was always really impressed with his integrity as a Republican. I'm very proud of him when he confronted a woman at a rally when she said that Barack Obama wasn't a citizen, and he said, "No, ma'am, he's an American, he's a good man." And I'm wondering, I'd like your opinion of other people in the Republican Party that might have that kind of integrity, if there are any.
There's too few. Almost like Frank Sinatra says, too few to mention. This last week has been one of the few times when I've seen Republicans actually stand up to Trump. I think that, way too many Republicans have bent their principles to accommodate a president who has no principles. I think too many Republicans have bent their morals to accommodate a president who has no morals. I'm old enough to remember when Republicans were against adulterous presidents. You remember that? Now they defend a guy who was cheating on his wife with a Playboy bunny and cheating on the Playboy bunny with a stripper simultaneously. So, I can't tell you how many Republican friends I have who told me back in 2016 they felt the same way about Trump that I did, but we're going to vote for him because of the Supreme Court. And he has delivered for them. So I can't tell you how many are looking the other way, and I think part of it is that they're getting used to it. You know what I mean? If you didn't stand up with the first, I mean, this guy does 5 outrageous things a week. I mean, just this week, he called one woman Pocahontas. He called another one Horseface. He praised the dude in Montana who body slammed the journalist. He's pretending, you know, Jamal Khashoggi was, I don't know what, abducted by aliens. You know, I mean, and so, you know, but I think that once they start getting used to looking the other way, that it's kind of like that, you know, inertia about, okay, this is the one that's going to do it. This is the one that's going to do it. I think Mitt Romney, to me, you know, I have hope that he will fill that void that's been left by John McCain. It should not take dying, being on your deathbed, to feel free and unencumbered to stand up for your beliefs above and beyond a precedent of your party. And by the way, you know, like Republicans are giving, you know, have donated their spine to science in order to stand with and play with Trump. This guy wasn't even a Republican until a few years ago. And, you know, to his credit, I think he's done an enormous amount. He's, you know, in a very short time, he's changed the Republican Party. He's changed the presidency. He's changed the country.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Jen Jorvie-Hoos. I work here in STEM. And thank you for your candid words. I heard your action call kind of at the end and all of your statements about how people are standing up and marching and making sure that their voices are heard when they see injustices. And since you have connections to possibly people in the current administration, my question is there any other action items, suggestions that you have for us to do when we are trying to combat policy that we feel is against what we believe in? And so making phone calls, sending emails, what action, donating to somebody who is going to sue against something that you don't believe in. What do you suggest, since you've been tied into this, that actually makes a difference that this administration would hear? Because I feel like it's very different from previous ones.
Look, I think you just named all of them, a lot of them. The first thing you can do is vote in November. You know, you guys are in California, but there's still some congressional seats here that can make a difference. I think one of the problems that we're really facing right now is that there are no checks and balances. The framers of the Constitution were very wise when they designed a system that of 3 co-equal independent branches of government that were supposed to provide checks and balances. But I think the Republican leadership has failed abysmally at checks and balances, and they are packing the courts in a way where checks and balances are going our way through there too. So really, the only check and balance that we have left is through the ballot box. And all those things that you just said, writing letters to the editor, doing social media campaigns, showing up at town halls, showing up at protests, calling your senators. I think the health care vote, remember when John McCain did his thumb down? I think that went the way it did because of the massive reaction from America and people going crazy, making phone calls and really telling their senators and representatives how they felt. So and social media today gives everybody, anybody, a platform. Believe me, I know they're all on my Twitter feed telling me I'm fat and should go back to Mexico. So, you know, you can take so many opportunities. I think you can, right now, I would, you know, with 20 days left, I'd figure out how to volunteer on a campaign of something where I could make a difference and there was, you know, a closed campaign. You can make phone calls right now and do canvassing, phone canvassing from your couch, you know, through new apps and things that exist. You don't even have to be in a campaign office. So take the next 20 days and get active.
Hi, good morning. If you need to know, You know, I know the names of canvassing. I've been out canvassing for the last 6 months. So I have a question for you. I have been spending the last 6 months canvassing for candidates here, trying to get out the vote. And I rang the doorbell of an older woman last weekend, and I asked her to to vote for female candidate for Carlsbad for mayor. And she said to me, "Come in, I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay." I thought this was going to go well. And she said, "I'm so angry at women right now, we'll never vote for a woman again." And I was shocked. I was like, "Okay, so tell me why." And she said, "I'm very angry at the woman who destroyed Brett Kavanaugh's life. And how can women do that?" And I was taken aback. That was not at all what I was expecting. So I'm kind of curious, if somebody had said that to you, how you would have reacted to her. Her point was that Christina Blasey Ford came forward and now has told Kavanaugh's daughters something about him that they don't ever need to know.
Well, look,
And that is the
I heard
dilemma.
that.
So
I
I'm
heard
just
that a
curious
lot.
your perspective.
I heard that a lot, and there were a lot of people. I wrote an op-ed in the midst of the Kavanaugh thing, saying that he should withdraw, because I knew Trump was not going to withdraw his name. I knew Republicans were going to fight till the end for him, and I'm worried for the integrity of the Supreme Court. To me, the Supreme Court is kind of hallowed ground, and still an institution most Americans respect, which is more than I can say for the presidency, and far more than I can say for Congress, which is, there are species of cockroaches that are more popular than Congress. So, you're going to get that, because right now we are in a level of tribalism in America where people put partisanship and put an agenda above everything, right? We're seeing it with some evangelical voters. I've heard evangelicals this week suggest that we should not be standing up for the Jamal Khashoggi murder, because there's, billions of dollars of arms sales up in the air. And it's about supporting Donald Trump, who's given them the Supreme Court justices they want. I've heard women say the same thing. I've heard Jewish folks who work for him somehow justify the response, the unjustifiable response in Charlottesville. Look, you can't do anything about that. If there's people who are willing to put tribalism and partisanship over principle and conviction and gender and ethnicity and common sense and sanity, you just got to move on and go knock on another door and not get discouraged.
Anna,
Oh my God.
a male voice. I was born in Argentina and immigrated when I was 8 as well, so hello.
You
If
got
you were
less
a
of an
campus-
accent than I do. So wait, I gotta tell him a story. So when I got on TV, I started getting all of these tweets all of a sudden from people who would say to me, so if they liked me, they would tell me, that I had this like sexy Latina accent, and if they hated me, they would tell me to go back to Mexico, which is, I'm not from Mexico, but okay. And I came home one day, I was dating, a guy from Idaho. I said, "Honey, do I have an accent?" And he laughed. But I'm from Miami. Have you guys heard Gloria and Emilio speak, or Pitbull? We all sound like me. Anyways, Chancellor, go right ahead.
Don't cry for me, Argentina. If you were a campus president over the next 2 years, or a campus leader, regardless of title, and there's only one president, but the campuses have many leaders, what would you do different? And depending on your answer, I will tell you we have 4 openings in the CSU. Humboldt, San Marcos, San Francisco, and Fullerton. So pick your zip code. But seriously, I mean, I think, this next 2 weeks is one thing, but then there's 2 years that follow, and within the
Look,
role of a public university, what can be done that actually you think could move the needle on the points that you have spoken so eloquently about today and before today?
well, a couple of things, right? And I'm not a university administrator, and I couldn't do the job if I tried. But look, I really do mean when I say that I think one of the biggest problems we have is lack of diversity of thought and embracing diversity of thought. And a university campus is exactly the environment that should promote diversity of thought, that should promote people hearing about each other's different stories and experiences. It's a lot of times the first time that people, that young people encounter folks that don't look like them and have had the same exact experiences that they have had. And so I think promoting conversations that go beyond the comfort zone and that go beyond the labels is very, very important. I am depending on this new generation because we've screwed this up royally. And when I look at Emma Gonzalez calling BS, it gives me hope. So I think there's, so promoting diversity of thought. I would say promoting engagement and the ability of calling BS and speaking truth to power. And lastly, we really have to figure out how to address this issue of millennials not voting. I saw a video that Barack Obama put out yesterday, which is very, very good. I'll tweet about it later in the day if I find it. But you guys should go look it up about the excuses that particularly young people give for not voting. My vote won't make a difference. And I don't like anybody that's running. All of those things. So, I think promoting diversity of thought, I think getting them to vote and really understand the importance of engagement and getting young people to speak truth to power and tell us about what their priorities are and really, if you can graduate students who have a social awareness that compels to action, you've done what you need to do.
Hi, I'm Liliana Castañeda Rossman. I'm retired from this wonderful institution, teaching in communication. And one of the classes I taught was dialogue. And what you said about inviting the diversity of opinions and so forth, this is what we promote here. This institution has done an amazing job with the leadership of President Haynes and all the other folks that are my colleagues and students and staff. Your point about the inviting that diversity of opinion, what then are institutions to do when the Milo Yiannopoulos of the world come or want to come and speak their truth or what they think is their truth?
Different institutions are different, right? And they react differently. There's people who think differently than I do on this, but it's one diversity of opinion is one thing. Anti-Semitism, homophobia, Holocaust denying is another thing. You can't. I often get asked, how do you combat fake news? It's very hard. It's very hard. Because if somebody wants to believe that Bill and Hillary Clinton are running a sex ring out of the basement of a pizza shop that does not have a basement, to the point where they show up with a gun to rescue the sex ring victims, what do you do? But to me, diversity of thought and giving platform to that is very different to giving a platform to hatred and ignorance and things that are not true. How a learning institution can give a platform to somebody that denies the Holocaust when you teach it in your history classes is beyond me. How, a learning institution can give a platform to homophobes when so many of the students are LGBTQ is beyond me. And so, I think you've got to be able to draw a line between diversity of thought, different opinions, different ideologies, different arguments, different experiences, and hate and ignorance. I don't think they're the same thing. And I think you're perfectly entitled to say, no hate in my campus. But I don't run a university funded with state money.
Anna,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your honesty and your refreshing viewpoints. I also want to thank the Sacred Heart nuns. We can see what happens when women help to make a contribution toward an institution run by men.
Yeah, I'm dying for a Sacred Heart nun to be Pope. Okay?
Me too. Let's just start with a cardinal. But I wanted to say, and I'm looking at the color of your blouse, which is quite lovely. It seems to me that a lot of what you're saying here, dare I say it, sounds democratic. So I'm wondering when you're going to cross that river and maybe even run for office.
Well, I'm never going to run for office because I like to drink, I like to cuss, and I like my private life. And I like to drive an Italian sports car. The entire thing doesn't work if you want to run for office. Look, why am I still a Republican? Remember what I told you at the beginning, that we are all who we are plus our experiences. I came to this country and I came to Florida. And I came during the Cold War. I came at a moment, I was fleeing communism and Ronald Reagan was standing up against communism. I came to a Florida where the Republican leaders were people like, Lincoln Diaz-Balart and Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, and there were a lot of people who looked like me and were able to represent. It was a very inclusive party. Probably if I had ended up in California under Pete Wilson, I'd be a Sandernista right now. So, I grew up in a very different Republican Party. I believe that having two strong parties is the best thing that can happen to America, and certainly to women, to people of color. Worst thing that can happen is to have one party take you for granted and another one openly antagonize or attack you. I've grown up within this party, and right now I kind of feel like a Republican in exile because this is Trump's party. This is no longer Republican principles or Republican ideology. I remember when Republicans were against tariffs. Now it seems we're all for them. I remember when Republicans were for a strong foreign policy. Now it seems we're isolationists. So few things. One is I fled communism at the age of 8. And so there's something kind of like internally in me that rebels against the idea of fleeing, of having somebody push me out of an institution that I've been part of. I was a Republican when Donald Trump was a Democrat. I was a Republican when Donald Trump was an independent. I'm a Republican now. He's faking it. And so now that gets to be a harder argument when he continues winning and when everybody is turning, when we see the Trumpification of the Republican Party. I also think, I like the idea of confronting Republicans who I think have sold out their principles and reminding them who they used to be and what they used to stand for. And I like the idea of pissing inside the tent. I also, you have no idea the hatred I get. They are obsessed with me. The Trump Republicans and the right-wing publications are obsessed with me. Every day they write about me and they say things about me, and it's like a constant obsession. I kind of enjoy knowing that I irritate the hell out of them. And I think I irritate the hell out of them because when they look at me, they got to look in the mirror and know that they're a bunch of sellouts. Oh, and lastly, I'm becoming a Democrat. Look, I like keeping my money. And I like, I look at Democratic leadership right now, and I think to myself, what is the party of millennials and, African Americans and Latinos doing with Nancy Pelosi? I mean, so to me, I'm just, like, I know I'm still a Republican when I turn on the TV and I watch Elizabeth Warren, and it's like I'm hearing nails on the chalkboard. Don't ask me why. I think it's a genetic predisposition. So there's things about the Democratic Party that I just, that don't appeal to me whatsoever. And there's there's a lot about Trump's party that doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. I hate the idea of being an independent and not having a say in primaries. I think we need open primaries. If we had open primaries, that's something I would think about, but I hate the idea of getting stuck with two candidates with a binary choice where I have had zero input in who those candidates are.
Hello. Sorry, I think my question might be untimely. Good morning. My name's Peggy Campo. I am a professor at a community college. I am the Riverside Community College District Academic Senate President. I am also a fellow Argentine, and I'm kind of happy of having an Argentine Pope. So, and I'm sorry, my question might be a little inopportune after your last statement. I think money invested in diversity isn't money ill spent. And as a community college professor, many times money spent at the community college, which is the probably most diverse set of students that we have, sometimes the money spent there is sometimes ill looked at. And I'd like to know your position on how can we promote more money invested in diversity. I don't think that's money ill spent.
Oh, I don't think that's money ill spent either. I mean, what I said about liking my money is I like it, like on tax issues, I'm a fiscal conservative. But if you're going to use my money, I'd love it for it to be used on diversity. I'm promoting diversity because I think having a representation of what the country looks like matters for all the reasons that I stated before. And I think diversity makes us better and stronger and richer. I think diversity is what makes America great today. As far as the Argentine Pope, I loved him too. And I mean, this is like an internal joke. She'll get it, you'll get it. But the miracle of a, humble Argentinian and he has such a great sense of humor, but he's got to clean up this shit. I mean, really, there's how many more decades are we going to go through these revelations, and how many more cardinals who are still in power are we going to have to see fall from accusations that are decades long? If you want to hold Brett Kavanaugh responsible for what he did 35 years ago, and I do, I certainly want to hold cardinals and priests responsible for what they did and what some of them are still doing.
Hi, as a fellow Cuban, I relate with your idea.
I'm not Cuban, man.
No,
I'm from Nicaragua.
I know you are. I was going to say Latina, and then I said Cuban because I'm Cuban. I spoke too fast. I relate to what you are saying in regards to our upbringing being so very different. You were raised in Miami. I actually was raised here. And so I want to affirm you on a couple of things from a higher ed perspective and as a woman. I want to affirm you in the fact that you have a voice and you have a powerful voice on behalf of women. And here in California, I'll speak on behalf of many of our younger girls and women who are not raised in Miami. And so we're not raised very much with this understanding as, you claimed, and I very much grew up with, like, you're a woman, you can do anything. There's really nothing stopping you. There's no barriers, there's no boundaries. Just move forward. That's all you have to do, especially when you've left a country. I want to affirm you to continue to be that voice and know that on this part of the country, your voice on behalf of women and young women is even louder and more powerfully needed, because that is not the reality that they live in. And so I just want to say, keep speaking loudly, and know that this pocket, I mean, I think you see us all as women here, especially in higher ed, this is such a gift, a small, tiny gift of reality. And we need our young girls to see you, to hear you, to speak, and to move through. And just thank you. Represent. Do so.
Thank you. You know, that's one of the things that's been very humbling from this position and from kind of my life. I don't know what it is about me, but it's almost like I have a tattoo that says quasi-therapist, open, office hours on my forehead, because I go through airports and I go through, supermarkets, and I'm pumping gas in my car, and women will often come up to me and just start sharing their stories. During the Kavanaugh stuff, it was about sexual assault. During the Access Hollywood tapes, it was about sexual harassment and sexual assault. Women of color often stop me and tell me how much it means to them to see somebody that they can identify with on TV, because there's so precious few of us. So I think, forget about reaffirming me, it reaffirms all of you and what you are all doing, because you're the ones that are raising this new generation of women and people of color and students and millennials and all of this to be, decent human beings who try to make this a little bit of a better world. So I reaffirm you. Forget me. I'm just, some talking head on TV. You guys are the ones doing the real work. So when those Access Hollywood tapes. So when so those came out, and I had this moment on TV where I was on with this woman, and I talked about Trump saying, boasting about grabbing a woman's pussy. Sorry, Chancellor. And my mother, it went viral, it became a thing. And my mother heard about it in Nicaragua. She was extremely upset with me. And she didn't speak to me for weeks, because she said she didn't raise me that way. She wasn't, I wasn't supposed to say those words. And I tried to convince her I was talking about a baby cat. I finally said to her, look, Mom, you don't cuss, you don't drink, you've been with one man your entire life. I am obviously my father's child. I think we have time for one last question.
Hi. I appreciate what you've said about the importance of voting to make a difference, but I am deeply troubled about the news about people being disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And their ability to vote being hampered.
Right. Like in Georgia, you mean?
Yeah. So there's lots of news about it happening all over the country, and so I just wondered what you could offer as comments about what to do about that. Because if voting is the primary mechanism by which we can change what's happening, and then people are being disenfranchised, we're in deep, deep trouble.
We are. I think it's a really difficult issue because we've got such little time left. Look, I think that's where you do things like donate to groups that are bringing legal action, because really the courts, if, like, for example, the guy running in Georgia is the Secretary of State, right? There's something intrinsically conflicting about that scenario. So, I think you can donate. I think you can bring attention to it. People need to know that they can't get away with it without, paying a price, that we are paying attention and we are watching. And, I think you've got to make sure that those that are not disenfranchised do not disengage because of the disappointment of seeing others being disenfranchised, which is a big problem. because there are all these shenanigans happening, because there's all this voter suppression happening, because it may still be happening on election day and we may be able not to do anything about it, it means that much more of us have got to go out and vote. Those of us who can have got to go out and do it. You know, just think about 2016. How many people didn't go out to vote or voted for Jill Stein, or what's the name of the guy who smoked pot in New Mexico? Johnson, because Hillary didn't fill their love tank, or because they didn't realize it was a binary choice. Yeah, I may not like her, I don't like him. Well, those are your two options, guys. You know, I mean, often elections are binary choices. And how many people didn't go out and vote and woke up with voters' remorse and a political hangover that's going to last 4 years, unless St. Bob Mueller does his thing, which I don't think is going to happen. But so, you know, I think that you should take what's happening, these disenfranchisements and the attempts at suppressing the vote, as more motivation to go out and vote and get the vote out from those who can and who will. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for everything you guys are doing for shaping the new generation, and thank you for having me here. It's a beautiful campus, it's a beautiful city. I hadn't been here. I really appreciate you guys having had me.
Thank you, Anna. That was quite inspiring and entertaining and thought-provoking. I am delighted to once again facilitate this year's fireside chat. Every year we hope it's a little more chilly in October so that the fireplace makes a little more sense, but that's okay. In order to preserve as much time for the chat itself, I again direct you to your printed program where you may read the extended biographies of each of our panel participants. You've already met our first distinguished panelist, Dr. Karen Haynes. And joining President Haynes on the panel are President Gabrielle Starr and President Juliana Barnes. So thank you. Thank you for being with us. President Starr began her role as president at Pomona College in July 2017. I'm a Pomona alum. Any other Pomona alums in here? Chirp, chirp. There we go. There you go. She is the 10th president of the college. Previous to this role, she served as dean of New York University's College of Arts and Science, overseeing the undergraduate experience for more than 7,000 students across 55 departments and programs. Dr. Starr received her bachelor's and master's degrees in women's studies at Emory University and her doctorate in English and American literature at Harvard University. President Barnes began her tenure as president of Cuyamaca College in October 2015. Prior to being president at Cuyamaca, Dr. Barnes served in leadership roles at both university and community college systems. From San Diego State University, she earned both a doctorate in educational leadership with a community college specialization and a master's degree in education multicultural counseling. As well, she holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of California, San Diego. So let's begin our chat. For this year's chat, we selected questions from the past 7 women's leadership forums to create a kind of best of list. All of these relate to today's conference theme of Together We Rise. And like past years, we grouped the questions into topics. Questions will vary for each president and are intended to allow us to delve deeper into the particular topic by exploring different aspects of that topic. And we will have time for questions from the audience at the end. So the first question group is about a reflection on the theme of Together We Rise. And President Starr, what are your reflections on the theme Together We Rise? Please share your thoughts with us.
They may have changed a little bit after hearing Nevado. You know, when I first started thinking about this, because the question says in your career, I started to think about when my career began. The answer to that is not when I either hit grad school or undergrad school or anywhere. I think that for me, the answer to that has been understanding where I fit within a network of relationships and what those relationships do that enable me to call on different kinds of ideas, different kinds of strengths, and different kinds of spirits as I move through life. So one example of this, so my grandmother was born in the late 19th century, and she was one of the youngest of 12 kids, and her parents had been slaves when they were little kids. And she lived with us until she died when I was 10, and I would listen to her stories about things that she had done. And there were two stories in particular that always stuck out to me. One was Christmas, where she had all the family had saved enough for an orange apiece for Christmas for all the kids. And she and two of her sisters went to go buy the oranges. The orange seller said she had to wait. There was nothing left but spoiled fruit at the end of the evening, so they snuck out and then snuck back once it was fully dark and pelted the stew out of the man with all of his oranges. And I loved this story because I was like, great, mischief, you know, she was outraged. And now I'm like, oh my God, her parents had to be terrified that this kind of act of defiance was going to lead to the death or anything of her children. But the sense that even in the dark, you can find some opportunity together to speak in a way or act in a way that asserts your worth as a human being and asserts that you can walk your own path when you have people around you. She wasn't going to do that on her own. She needed somebody to go with her. And so I think for me that theme of Together We Rise comes from the fact that none of us going to do this on our own. We always have to have some of us go along with each other. My husband is a search consultant, and he was doing the search for the Atlanta Fed, and there'd never been a person of color running the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta. And he was thrilled that his search resulted in the first openly gay African-American head of a search of a Federal Reserve Bank. But he says he was calling people every time he called a woman. A woman would say to him, well, I don't know, I've got a family, I don't know if this is the right time for me to make a move, this may be really hard for me. And every time he would call a man, the man would say, well, let me see if it's the right job, then maybe I'll take it. So he told me, whatever I did, please don't sound like all the women he talked to. And that if it was the right job for me, we'd find a way together to move all the way across country. That theme has been finding women to whom I can speak honestly. President Coley here, who is a rock, finding provosts and presidents across the country that I can call up and say, hey, I've got a problem. And finding those spaces of honesty that allow me to think enough to make the decisions that I need to make as a president. And none of those should be made without some form of togetherness, because on my own, no matter how smart I might think I am, I only have my one perspective. So that's probably the best that I would say there.
Thank you. And President Barnes, what are your reflections on the theme, and how has this theme emerged for you in your career?
Thank you. I'll echo what you had just said, that after Anna spoke, I said, wow, anything goes. And actually my chancellor's in the room, and you said, you know, you could go there. So I was wondering, like, how scripted do I need to be? So I'm looking forward to throwing out some cuss words as I'm getting my...
You go.
So, and I will go there. Okay, so, but together we rise. Together we rise. You know, in reflecting on this, I was reflecting on my own childhood. So I was born and raised in San Diego, which is a rare thing, but I have about 100 relatives here in San Diego. I have a very tight-knit family. And so really this whole concept of Together We Rise for me really starts with my family experiences, because we were broke, we had a lot of struggles, and we had to come together to be able to lift one another up and move forward in our lives. I found that, throughout my life, educationally and professionally as well. So like maybe many of you, I was also the first one in my family to go to college. And I had to latch on to others to understand that culture as I transitioned, from high school to college. A lot of this wasn't necessarily by design, though, it was by accident, and I found that also in my career, where I just kind of stumbled upon particular positions as I transitioned through my career. So I look at this whole piece on Together We Rise kind of from my early experiences and kind of where I am right now. And I think my early experiences, a lot of these things were kind of, again, there was still that familial kind of base and that those relationships that I had in my family. But as I emerged into my education and professional life, I feel like so much of how I moved through the system was kind of not by design, but by accident. And now that I've kind of transitioned into particular positions, and as you've heard, I worked in the university for 9 years. And then now I've been in the community colleges since 1999. So I don't even know how many years that is. 20? More than 20, or almost 20 years. And I think now I'm just so mindful of the fact that I cannot do this alone, and this cannot be by accident. And so I proactively seek out mentorship. I proactively look to mentor others in my role, because I really do believe that we all are uplifted when we uplift each other. I'm going to reflect upon something I read the other day. I was reading about Dolores Huerta, who was an activist, and obviously she helped to co-establish the United Farm Workers. We always hear about Cesar Chavez, right? And do you guys know that Dolores Huerta now has her own day on April the 10th? That's now law, which I love. And she said something that really resonated with me, and she said that she used to believe that self-recognition, that it wasn't appropriate to accept that recognition. And I thought about that, because when people would give me recognition, say, oh, thank you for this, or, oh, I appreciate that, I'm like, oh, no. And what Dolores said was that she now believes that, yes, one must receive that self-recognition, because it's not for yourself, it's for who you represent. And so I look at that, and I love what Anna was saying, because she talked a lot about the intersectionality of who she is. And I'm a woman of color. I came from a poor background. I was a young administrator, and so all of those things define who I am. And so as I uplift my own self, I don't do it for myself. I do it in recognition of who I am and who I represent. So for me, this whole piece on Together We Rise, we do this in unity with one another by uplifting not only ourselves, not only recognizing others, but also recognizing ourselves in terms of who we represent.
Great, thank you. I'm sitting up here, I'm reaching to grab my phone to tweet, just little comments, right? So leadership by accident and recognition for who we represent. These are pretty powerful statements, I think. President Haynes, for you, our question has a little bit of a different focus. From your perspective, as a longstanding ACE Network presidential sponsor, what do you believe is this network's role and responsibility related to our theme of Together We Rise?
Well, I would say first that what both of my colleagues here have said about the need to have that support network, familial, close geographic, professional, or beyond, is one of the things that the ACE network has done. Those of you who were here last night, I'm going to repeat a piece. I was already an academic administrator, the first ever female administrator at the University of Houston, when I served on the ACE Commission on Women and heard that these networks existed in other places in the country, but not in Texas, which is where I was, and heard about exactly what the purpose of the ACE network was to provide those places where we could see role models, where we could share questions, where we could ask sort of the kinds of questions that in other mixed company perhaps we might not ask. Did he really say that? Were you aware that you were just spoken over repeatedly by, and to provide it in a more formalized way to both build on all of the other kinds of familial, personal relationships in a way that provided also the connection between what might be networking to actually coaching and more formalized mentoring, so that women could see and hear and have those safe places. And I would say the last piece for me that has been critical and I take so important is that as we have those networks and as we move through careers, that we also realize how important it is to keep reaching back, to keep pulling women forward into positions and with all of the abilities to say it's okay to take recognition. It's obviously smart to ask other people to weigh in on serious decisions that we all make in administration. So I have found it both for me early in my career, someplace where I wished I had more of that formalized network, and an increasingly important way to gather larger groups of women together to share experiences and provide the hope and the inspiration of together we rise and it is possible.
Great, thank you. So our next question group is about mentorship. This past year, members of the network designed and implemented a survey of the membership. We're going to hear more about this survey during our lunch activities. One of the findings is that many in our network view finding a mentor as a challenge or barrier to professional advancement. Over the years, the issue of finding a mentor has emerged again and again. So, President Barnes, in your experience, to what degree have mentors or sponsors had an impact on your advancement?
Yeah, I love that question. You know, I think in my early days, in my educational professional days, I always saw people that I kind of latched onto, but they didn't know it. I'm serious. And I recently actually told two of them, probably in the last month, how I've been observing them for the last 15 years. It's actually kind of emotional that I'm thinking about it because I'm just going to say their names. One is Maria Nieto Sr., who's, does anybody know her, Maria Nieto Sr.? She's on the San Diego Community College Board of Trustees, and she's also a professor at San Diego State. And the other one is a former chancellor, or she's the current chancellor at San Diego Community College District, Constance Carroll, where I served in that district for 15 years, and I was a dean and a VP, and I didn't really get to interface as much with the chancellor. And so I think there were more like role models that I would watch and I would observe and I would try to emulate. But I think as a younger professional, and maybe an experienced professional, I didn't feel comfortable, or maybe, I don't know if it wasn't, I didn't feel worthy, but I didn't even know how to say, I'm seeking mentorship and I need your help. And so I would just really kind of observe and kind of learn from them. And I recently just shared with both of them at a couple of different events the impact that they've actually had on my life and on my education, on my professional endeavors. And they were like, wow. And so, and I felt the need to do that. Now that, so I've been a president now for 3 years, and you know, it's taken that long. I know you were like, okay, so you figured it out. I'm like, not quite. You know, I'm still, you know, I think you're always, you know, trying to figure it out. But I do feel a little bit more grounded now, and I'm going into my 4th year. And actually, just a couple of months ago, I called a president that I used to work with in my former district, and I said, I need and want your mentorship. I said, what starts to happen in the 4th year? I feel a little grounded. I feel like I see what the vision is and the direction. I think people are on board. Like, now what? And so I'm finding myself seeking out that mentorship. And the other things, I'm going to call her out, and it's not just because she's my boss, but my chancellor, Dr. Cindy Miles, she's here in the house. And it has been a joy and a blessing. If you do not know Dr. Cindy Miles, you must know her. And hashtag keep it real, right? That's what I want to say about you, Cindy. And so I now am in a position where I'm proactively seeking out the mentorship. I'm asking for the mentorship. I'm I'm taking in that mentorship. Whereas before it was just kind of happening and I was like, okay, I'm watching you. And I just think that piece is just so important. And I love what you said about, let's seek out mentorship. Ask for it. There are barriers, but I think part of it is we are the barrier, that we don't ask for it. We don't seek it out. And so what I try to do now, too, is also be a mentor to others. And I do that professionally through a lot of professional organizations. I have like 6 formal mentees that I'm working with right now. And there's others that I just open myself up to. I was in the Apple store the other day, and my daughter was getting a new phone, and the gal was talking about, school and all that. And I said, okay, so tell me more about that, And so I find myself, whether I'm at the Apple store, or I'm at the grocery store, I'm in a professional setting like this, I want to open myself up and make myself available or help to make connections to others. So I've definitely benefited from having those mentors that were more like role models, and they didn't really know they're my mentors. But now I'm more seeking it out, and kind of more in a professional, kind of intentional way.
That's good. Thank you. President Haynes, when you have served as a mentor sponsor for others, what has been your approach?
So twofold, and I would say I would echo the fact that women don't always feel or understand or have access to actually asking for a mentor. So I have had, particularly here on this campus, a number of women who did step up and ask for that mentoring. But I would also say, before I talk about what I do, is I have watched women on this campus and some throughout the system who I knew, where I have learned that I can reach out to them and say, I see talent, I see, the possibilities. Tell me, what your aspirations are, and let me see if that connects to what I have, either skill sets or on this campus, the ability to help people perhaps be on a specific task force, expand roles within their current, expand the portfolio within their current position or role. So both of those, I think, are important. And I think when you talk about mentoring, and there's a variety of different definitions, but it ought to have both a combination of, where you see their talent and skills and where they think they want to go. I'm a fairly direct communicator. And what I also think that is important in being the mentor is to be a kind critic when people are asking, can I move forward? To be able to identify, to the extent you see it behaviorally, where they may need help in whether it is anything from communication to expanding a part of their portfolio for the next part of their job. I also know that mentors are not lifelong. They're not career lifelong. And there's a point in time when a mentor can be very helpful, very directive, very supportive. And then sometimes you can outgrow your mentor. And I have tried to be also aware of when that point is for me to let somebody go, because they really are either at a different stage or need a different kind of mentor for the next career step. So it is very much, I think, a two-way conversation if it's going to be helpful and useful, that is direct, that connects to your sense of self and the mentor's ability to fill some of those roles, or to expand portfolios. Women get pushed into velvet ghettos or doing tasks in systems on campuses because they can do it well. But then they get asked to do that task over and over and over again, which doesn't provide the future focus for careers. So I also try to get people thinking about that, and where it's within my power to try to provide other opportunities that expand experiential basis.
Great, thank you. President Starr, research indicates that there are fewer opportunities for women for both formal and informal networks. Has this been true in your experience, and how have you been able to find mentors?
So I have a somewhat bias against mentor matching because I left chemistry in college, because there was one woman chemistry professor, and she was going to mentor the heck out of me, and I had no interest in I had no interest in mass spectrometry at all. But I did find a mentor who was in French and Italian, and was an extraordinary woman who came to my inauguration and spoke there. And so that is a person who just retired, and it feels so special that she has been with me for this long. I will say that while people, I don't think mentor matches, I have had, you might call them blind dates, or mentorship moments engineered by other people without my knowledge. So there are 3 examples that I'll give there. The first 2 were my father did. I went to college early, I was 15, and my dad had, without my knowledge, called up the dean of students and said that please just watch over my daughter and let me know if anything goes wrong, and I'll be up there in a heartbeat, but I need somebody to keep an eye on her, and will you do it? And I didn't learn that he had done that until he passed away, and my father told me that he had been kind of watching me. The second one was Skip Gates, who has entered the room the second time. Once again, my father went up to him at a book signing in Atlanta and said, "My daughter's coming to Harvard. You need to watch out for her." Wow. And he did. Lo and behold, he did. He called me. I was in a bad state at the end of the first semester. He called me into his office, let me cry in his office for an hour, and then, sent me off bucked up to go back and do whatever else I had to do. So I think the lesson there is you need lots of people looking out for you. And sometimes you can be lucky to have someone do that on your behalf. And so as you look at the people whom you meet and say, I may not be the right person for them, but I know I know someone who really can help her or help him, and how can I engineer that connection? I think that's really important. I believe in blind dates also because I got married off of one. So I think sometimes getting by with the kindness of friends. And then finally, I would say that I was very lucky at NYU, and that there were more female than male deans at the university. And John Sexton, who was president, he became a mentor because I laughed at him, and nobody else would. So he said something utterly ridiculous, and I was like, after that, he was like, "Okay, you have the guts to stand up to me, so let's duke this out." And so I think that we find mentors by all sorts of different paths, but it's not just the looking up or looking down, it's people looking out on the side for you to help you find the right person.
Yeah, great. Your dad rocks. It's good. So our next question group is about motivation and self-care, another topic that often comes up at these conferences. So we know these are trying times for higher education, whatever position we may be in. There is cacophonous rhetoric about the lack of value of a college degree and misconceptions about the role of scholarship and the academy. All of these factors combine to make the job of president especially challenging. Within this context, we'd like to know, how do you stay motivated, stay focused, and care for yourself? So, President Haynes, in thinking about self-care, what are your strategies, and how have you adapted these strategies throughout your career?
So in terms of both the motivation for a moment, I have, I think, gotten clearer and clearer over decades of academic leadership that, one, what motivates me has to be the optimism and the focus that we all have on the next generation that we are preparing. And to try to, increasingly hard in the last couple of years, but try to then reduce the noise of all of the higher education critical concerns, the voices that would either not support what we do or how we do it. And I think what Patricia and some of you know is I also have spent, I think, a lot of time talking about, self-care and enough work-life balance that is never done perfectly. But for me, and I think for many people, and particularly for women who are often the nurturers of all kinds of people around them, family, the entire campus community, children, et cetera, for me, the importance is if we're not going to be selfish enough about some level of self-care and balance, we will not retain the resiliency and the passion for the work that we do. I can feel when I get to that straining point in a week or in a month where I am fatigued. I'm no longer passionate. I feel a little angrier at some comments in some situations. So I do, and some of you have heard me say this. My calendar is blocked sometimes maybe every 6 or 8 weeks for a weekend without events. When I go truly on vacation, and I do for 2 and 3 weeks, my chief of staff actually takes my inbox, so I don't even have the pull of looking at it and being drawn into work, knowing that she will put in anything I need to know it's finished, or obviously contact me in a crisis. I think the other gift we give to ourselves, and it's maybe antithetical to talking about self-care, is to spend the time nurturing the people around you, your leadership team, so that truly the gift to each of us to each other is that no campus rests on one person. No decisions can't be made because there's an absence of one person or one voice. And I think that to me has been both a focus and a strength, knowing that all of us together really are what drives the university. And when you begin to think as a president, it is all and only on you, then maybe you need to look at what you're not doing to take care of and mentor the people around you so that they feel that we're in this and together we rise.
Thank you. President Starr, how do you maintain resilience, especially in times of crisis and change?
So I'll tell a little story. I'm an English professor, I can't help it. And this kind of goes on, piggybacks on yours, that in my first year, everybody has a risk tracking sheet or something that everybody, and you have to know what's going on with all your risks. And all of them except for a hurricane. That's where I used to live. Earthquake, that's why I said hurricane. Earthquake hit during my first year. And I was headed back to New York. I had some events that I needed to do, but also my cousin was dying of pancreatic cancer. And I needed to get back to see him, but it was clear that there was going to be a big student protest while I was gone. And so I was like, well, maybe I should postpone this trip, maybe I should do that, maybe I should do this. And my leadership team collectively said, no, you're not. We have this, you're going to go. And so we sat down, put together a plan, I worked back and forth, they kept me, I felt almost like I was there, blow by blow, by text message for the whole thing. They did an amazing job. And then that made me realize, okay, really, it's all right, because especially when you go into a new situation and you feel like you have to be as on top of every single part of it as you have to, as you can, because you don't know the space fully. Well, you're never going to know it fully. And you're always going to forget somebody's name, and you're always going to wonder where that strange room is that you've never actually had to go to until the moment that you get there. And realizing that was okay. And it was that crisis moment where I was like, all right, they can carry that water. And then the other thing is I have decided that I will have to get a dog because my 8-year-old does not find his highest and best self-actualization as my comfort animal. He's awfully sweet, though.
Great. Well, good. Get one from go rescue a dog, and that would be even more special. So, President Barnes, many talk about work-life balance. Is it possible to achieve it, and how do you aspire to achieve it?
I love that question. So I actually say often that no, it's not quite possible to always be in a state of balance, but that there's always the pursuit of balance, because you're always striving to get there. And I think Anna said that you find your sweet spot every once in a while, and you feel zen. You're like, okay, I'm balanced, and then you're off balance. But I have a funny story that came to me. I don't know when you guys were talking. I don't even know how this got in my head, but I remember reading a book I have two daughters, and there was a book called The Way It Is, and it was about a new mother. And she thought about when she had her baby, what it was going to be like. And so on one page it says, my baby will sleep, all night long, and it'll be peaceful, and I'll rock my baby to sleep. And then it shows, but this is the way it really is. And the baby's like, wah, and then I'm going to, play and have playtime, and it's going to be lovely, and there's toys thrown all over the place and all that. And I think to myself, think about, everything that you've done today to get here. Think about the last week and everything that you've had to juggle both personally and professionally. I know that, sometimes I feel like I should be wearing an S under the jacket, like Superwoman. Like on Sundays, I go grocery shopping, do laundry, chop up some vegetables so I could employ the use of my new slow cooker. I'm just trying to, and this is true. I'm just trying to do everything. Well, I did this, I kid you not, a week and a half ago, the way it really is. So then you come to work and you're in a meeting, you're like, hi, how's everyone doing? And you're thinking, you have no, I was about to cuss, see? You have no idea what it took for me to sit here before you right now to say, hi, how are you doing? You have no idea. I kid you not, a couple of weeks ago, again, trying to be super person, I was like, oh, shoot, it's so-and-so's birthday. And I have a meeting at 8. I'm going to run to Albertsons and go get some flowers. Run into Albertsons, and I saw that the cashier was looking at me really funny. And I was like, oh, hey, what's going on? Well, I went to my car. I only had one eye of makeup on. I forgot to put the other. I was like, oh, God, I must have had a crazy morning. But then, of course, got to work, fixed the eye, and then went to the meeting and said, hi, how's everyone doing? And so I call it the pursuit of balance, because we do juggle so many things, and we try to do all of them well. And so I heard somebody say this, and I'm sure maybe somebody famous said this, and I've latched onto it, and I use it at my own institution. And when people say, oh, how do you juggle it all? How do you do it all? And I said, well, the trick is to keep all of the balls in the air, try to keep all the balls in the air, and to know which ones are made of glass and which ones are made of rubber. Mm-hmm. Because you will drop some balls. And I think every day for me, the glass and rubber balls change. And I actually will sit in a meeting, and I'll be talking to someone, and I'll be looking down on the floor, and they're, what are you looking at? I'm like, I'm looking at all the rubber balls right now, because they're all sitting right here. And it's okay, because now I'm juggling the glass ones, and it's okay. But I think we have to also just be very forgiving of ourselves, that we can't be everything to everybody all the time, and all we could do is do the best that we could do. But really trying to, understand what those priorities are in your life, both personally and professionally. Keep those glass balls in the air. Try to keep the rubber ones in the air, but know that some of them are going to drop, and that it's okay, and that you could, have the one eye of makeup on, and you know what? The next day, it's all good. You're still who you are, and you're still, the wonderful person that you are. So.
Great, thank you. So this last question is one we're going to ask of all of our panelists. And it's a question that came from the audience, I don't know if it's last year or the year before, that we thought was just so fabulous we needed to incorporate it this year. So President Starr, I'll ask you, what one piece of advice are you dying to share with the women leaders in this room, looking to grow and develop as higher education leaders?
You have a superpower, which is to pretend you didn't hear that. And this goes a bit back to what Anna was saying, that you're going to hear all sorts of things that are said in passing, said loudly, whispered, everything. And you can just pretend not to hear it and let it wash over you is the most sometimes self-affirming thing that you can do. Real criticism, take it. But some of this other stuff, you just have to let it go. And it's people will criticize you for not being someone you're not leading like a man. not talking like a man. And young women will say, well, I never thought I could be a leader because I never saw, I wasn't made in that mold. When the mold was made by people who are 60 years older than her and have different anatomy. So just allow yourself to have that privilege of realizing you don't have to fit the mold of everybody you've seen before you. And sometimes that's going to happen by your keeping your eyes straight ahead and not letting yourselves be distracted by all those whispers.
Okay, thank you. President Barnes.
I would say believe that you can. I think in my own experiences that I think I've been my own worst enemy in terms of belief in self. And I found that both educationally and professionally. And I love what you were saying. I think really, really understanding who you are and being who you are. I became a dean when I was 32 years old, and that was almost 20 years ago. So yes, I'm in my 50s. A lot of people go, how old is she? But yeah, so I'm in my 50s now. But I was a dean in my early 30s, and I looked like I was in my 20s. And I thought at the time that I had to be a particular way in order. I needed to be more dean-like. I should cut my hair. I should talk a little deeper. And we think that. And over time, it has taken some time for me to find myself and who I am. And I realized that who I am works. And I think that's kind of a big blessing, and I'm just very joyful over that. I think I'll leave it at that. For some reason, I just want to fold in this example, and I don't even know how this goes. And Cindy, okay, I'm just going to tell you, one of the greatest moments in my career, and this is maybe finding yourself and who you are as well, and even finding that in other people. For what it's worth, one of my favorite moments in my professional experience, it was actually a chancellor's cabinet meeting so we have the presidents and the vice chancellors who come to the meetings. And we were having a rough patch. There was a lot of union negotiations happening right now, and we were just getting pulled, and we were kind of feeling really beat up and defeated. And my chancellor came into the room, sat at the head of the table, and I'll tell you, she's awesome, smart, knowledgeable, but she's real. # keep it real. And she came in, put her book down. You kind of spread yourself out on a thing, because you talked about how men take space and how women don't. And so, yeah, you did the whole space thing. I can't do it because I have a skirt on right now. But you did the whole space thing, and she looked at all of us, and you could tell we were suffering. We're like, oh, we're getting beat up right now. And you just looked at all of us, and you said, fuck it. I don't know if you know that was one of the greatest professional experiences I've ever had. I said I wanted to throw out a cuss word. But the # keep it real, knowing who you are and channeling, who you are, at appropriate moments in time, I just think that works. So just know who you are, be who you are, lead with who you are, and you can't go wrong.
That's a hilarious story. I was recently with Chancellor Miles.
Don't put that in the Twitter.
I had the opportunity to travel with Chancellor Miles on a trip to Indianapolis and D.C., and I think I saw one of those moments, a very similar one. So, President Haynes, your piece of advice.
Certainly not very different from my colleagues, but take your position seriously, but do not take yourself seriously. And I think that builds on, the authenticity, the being okay to not be and act and dress like a 60-year-old white male who embodies for many of us still the power in the room. I know some of you have heard the story, but when I think of what being authentic to myself, and one of those moments was when I came to interview here, and I know some of you have heard this story, knew I would be the first female president here, a young university, knew I was the only female candidate. Home in Texas, I say to my husband, should I wear this suit, gray, or this suit, fuchsia? And he says, do you want the job? I said, of course I do. He said, wear the gray. Hell no. And his husband's still, why did you bother to ask? But wore the fuchsia suit, walked into the forum, and said to the group, if you're wondering why I wore this fuchsia suit, I'm the first candidate, and I want you to remember me at the end. And I am certain the other two candidates will not show up in fuchsia. Be yourself.
Love it.
Thank you, Presidents, for participating in this panel today. I think I speak for all of us here today when I say that it's truly an honor. Every year I've been able to facilitate this discussion and participate in this discussion. It's an incredible honor. There's a lot going on in my head right now. I'm watching all of you, making sure that you will be recognizing you and then monitoring here, but getting lost in their answers is a true pleasure, and I appreciate everything that you've shared. So now what we're going to do is turn it over to the audience for a few questions. And just like we did before with Anna, there will be microphones around so that everyone can hear your questions. So who has the first one?
I'm Jenny Zorn. I'm provost at CSU Bakersfield, and I have a question for President Haynes. As you're transitioning into your retirement, I'm looking forward to your next career as a public official, and I wonder when your campaign will start.
Jenny, I appreciate your thoughts and comments. And while the current political landscape and some of the options are not pleasant to me, that's not going to be where I go in my next post-retirement career.
Delcy Perez from Miracosta Community College. So when I first started to come into ACE, there was a speaker who talked about when women leaders are let go, oftentimes women scatter. But when men leaders are let go, they often recover fairly quickly because men come around them and help them seek new opportunities. And so my question for you, because that was very profound for me, because oftentimes it may not be a fit, and there will be people who lose jobs. But how have you supported other women who may be going through difficulties as a leader to come around and support them, and any suggestions for the rest of us? I didn't expect the silence.
Okay, Dilsey, I'm going to start. So, first of all, I have seen and lived those truths. What you say is, I think, what we experience at a national level. One, women don't necessarily reach out to support women who have gone through an untimely, uncomfortable, unfair non-retention to help them resurrect either their career or themselves in their self-reflection. The other thing I also would be unfair to say in the reaching out is to also acknowledge that sometimes women leaders do make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so I have, at least twice that I can remember in my presidencies, not in the CSU, but nationally, reached out to a woman colleague who was non-retained, but also with some sense of feeling that some part of this was about her, and how do you actually change both the behaviors, and how did you help change the narrative of this is not the end of a career, and a sense of lack of worth that comes very much more quickly to women, I think, who internalize the blame, deserved in part or not at all, while many men don't internalize that. It's the externalization and the men's network that help them move on, sometimes very surprisingly, and sometimes after multiple failures and non-retentions.
Anything else to add, President Barnes or President Starr?
Interestingly, in my career, I've let go of two people, and they were men, actually. But, you know, I think just in general, just who I am, I'm very much, I think just like many of us, very much lead through kind of relationships and interpersonal. And I think with both men and women, when I see struggles in the workplace, that I tend to address them right away and kind of talk through it and, you know, provide support to the extent that I can to help that person to kind of transcend any issues that they may be having. Yeah.
So I think it depends on how well you know the situation, how honest the person wants you to be with them, and how honest they want to be with you. You know, I've seen some colleagues go through some very rough patches, and essentially the only thing that you can do is just continually text them or call them until they answer, and then gauge and see what kind of help they need. You know, I will say that, you know, if you look at the last year, we have seen in a lot of different places some leaders mysteriously disappear. Especially, it's been surprising to no one, some African American leaders of colleges that just seem to vanish overnight. And it's, in one case, there was someone who was accused of having plagiarized his dissertation. His doctoral institution said, in fact, no, there were some errors in the citation in the literature search part of this dissertation, but it wasn't there's no evidence of plagiarism. But at that point, he'd had it, right? That someone on his faculty had sent an anonymous letter to the news media and his board. So you want to be protective, and you want to help lift people up, right? Together we rise. Well, you know, the phoenix can come back out of the ashes, but you have to be willing to have someone who's willing to be supported, which sometimes people aren't because it's too painful, and then you have to just try and be there as much as you can.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kendra Rivera. I'm a faculty member here at Cal State San Marcos. And a question to all or any of you. Is there room for resistance or good old-fashioned rabble-rousing and activism, feminist activism, in the current leadership model that we have, which is based on a patriarchal system? And is there room for recreating, re-envisioning, re-leading that space? Thank you.
That's deep.
Sometimes I feel like very, very simply being in the room is rabble-rousing enough.
Yeah.
And speaking out, you know, there's a dominant. I was listening very carefully to Ana Navarro when she was talking about viewpoint diversity, which is often not in the way she was using it, I think, just a shibboleth for the supposed lack of truly conservative voices on college campuses. And I was in a meeting of presidents, and there was one president who was spouting this, and I understood why he was, but he now doesn't speak to me anymore because I said, why are you participating in a narrative that is destructive of colleges and universities instead of showing why that is not entirely the case? That is, you know, when the reality is that we have people from all over the world. We have the best educational system in the world. And the hand-wringing about young people and academia has been going on since Socrates drank that hemlock. So, so now he doesn't speak to me. That I don't know where that fits into a second wave or third wave or whatever wave level of activism, but I think there is certainly room for us to speak loudly. We always have to speak carefully, but speak when we hear that things that are, to quote Jonathan Swift, the thing that is not.
Yeah, you know, I would say, you know, when I think of activism, the immediate thing that came to my mind was a couple of times in college when, you know, the students were really upset about something, we went to the streets. And I will always remember those experiences and how powerful they were. And I think in the realm of higher education, I think that activism looks different. That it's not necessarily going to the streets, but it's being at the table and giving voice to those matters that are important and having an opportunity, so for me, through policy and procedure changes that serve as barriers to particular populations. And so I think in the higher education realm, certainly there is room for activism, but it looks different. So going to the streets is one way, but being at the table and influencing systemic barriers and issues is another way that there's room for activism to achieve what we're trying to achieve.
I think both of them, Kendra, have said that, and the only piece that I would add is it's certainly policies and practices as an institution that can and should create the next wave of opportunities and access. And I also think it is very much, from my perspective, a sense of activism, even just walking the talk day in and day out and being sure that you're not just spouting values, but in the assessment of policies and practices, in the hiring processes of people throughout an institution, in the treatment of students from multicultural, diverse backgrounds, in all senses of that, that you are being a different activism from going, from going to the streets, but very much should be part of what we believe will create broader access and change, maybe not change that is going to get in the newspaper from the moment, but change over time and more broadly.
So I'll just say one last thing on that. So I had the privilege of being with Merle Evers, the widow of Medgar Evers, and John Lawton, who was the pastor who had brought nonviolence from Gandhi to Martin Luther King Jr. And having them, the two of them on stage, was like watching fire and ice. John Lawton was Jesus and the Buddha and Gandhi every 3 minutes. He was coming back down to a level of control. He was saying this, going about strategy and activism. Merle Evers is still mad as hell. And we had tea, and I had just been youth-splained about the history of activism in college campuses and the rise of women's studies, check. The rise of African American studies, check. The rise of Asian American studies, check. The still needing rise of Native American studies, check. And this 19-year-old was just all in my face. And after I left this room where I tried to keep my temper, I was meeting Mrs. Evers, and I told her this story, and she said simply to me, "What you need is a gathering of the elders, because we can remind you that there is a time for every form of activism, and you have to find what is useful and right and what you're called to when you're called to it." So then I cried, and then I felt better.
Kendra, I think your question is really provocative because I'm going to take a moment because I know Kendra really well. It's what I hear in their answers too is sort of that balance of we're part of a system and we think about systemic oppressions. So how much are we becoming part of the system that perpetuates what we're actually trying to work around and against? And identity questions and how far do you go, where do you step back, and what does activism look like at every level of the system? So
Yeah, now you got us hot too, because I'll have to tell a story. Some of you might have heard me tell this before, but I knew what I wanted to do when I became a president, and it has to do with activism, and it has to do with systemic barriers to student success and equity. And so I am a second-degree black belt in karate. I'm not training anymore. I haven't trained in a few years, but I trained for 20 years. Yes, yeah, tough. But and I was trying to figure out how I was going to incorporate who I am into my very first presidential convocation, and what my vision was with regard to breaking through these system issues, these systemic barriers that our students face. And so I decided my very first presidential convocation to, I was showed all the data and these disproportionate impact for students of color in particular, that, they're not achieving these milestone outcomes and this type of thing. And so, we had this, wonderful thing, set the vision, and at the very end of my presidential convocation, I took off my high heels, took off my jacket, put my karate gi on, and I put my black belt on. I called up 2 of my vice presidents, and I had a board that said, institutional barriers to student success and equity. And I said, I, as your president, I am going to demonstrate my commitment to breaking through these institutional barriers to student success and equity. So I proceeded to try to break, I said try, I already gave it away, to break this board. And there's a video on this somewhere floating out there. And I did not break the board. And I was like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. I'm going to do this. And I said, one more time. And I underestimated kind of how nervous I would be in front of this big crowd of my new faculty, staff, and administrators. And I said, okay, you're president, breaking through these institutional barriers to student success and equity. So I beckoned all my chi, my energy, and went for it again. And I didn't break the board, but I broke my hand right then and there. This is a true story. I had to leave my convocation, go to emergency, and get a cast. And what it did was as a couple of things is, one, it conveyed the message in terms of the vision that I had for breaking through those barriers and what they were getting with me as a new president. And the second thing that it did is that I got an outpouring of love and emails from staff and faculty that said, one person alone cannot break through institutional barriers, that it takes a village. And so that was my activist moment. But throughout the 3 years that I've been serving as president, moving into the 4th year, they know what they have in me. And I keep a virtual bag. I say this. I keep a virtual bag packed at my office door because that's what I live and breathe in terms of my values. And if I can't go there at my institution, then I need to get my virtual bag and leave. And so that activism kind of spirit, you carry it with you. And so each of you have some reason why you're in the roles that you're in. And kind of living and breathing that and staying true to that. And again, it may not be going to the streets, but it's conveyed in the decisions that you make and the practices and how you do your job every day.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hi. I don't know if it's as relevant now because I think you just gave me the best example, but one of the words that comes to mind a lot when I get coached by men is, as a woman, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Okay, well, what does that mean? I've been vulnerable my whole life. But just being a woman leader, I think, makes us vulnerable. But what immediately comes to mind is we will cry oftentimes, or we will be emotional, right? There are different aspects of what that might mean. So I was kind of curious what vulnerability means to you as leaders. But more importantly is, as leaders, where have you seen others, specifically men, be willing to break down their barriers and be more vulnerable as leaders?
I'll take a stab at it. So first I'll tell a bit about, I was able to bring to campus a superior human being as our new VP and Dean of Students, who tells this story. She was in my office, and I was explaining that I had since my first year about 15 grown people on the sofa in my office crying, most of them men, about various things. And she looked at me and she said, well, honey, your first problem is that you had a box of tissues in here. And so I was like, really? She says, yeah, I don't keep tissues in my office. I say, if you feel like you need to cry, there's a bathroom down the hall. You can go compose yourself and come back. And half the time people stop. Half the time they go away and come back. She just says, I'll be waiting right here. And kind of like Anna, sometimes I feel like I have tattooed across my forehead, go ahead, tell me your story. I had a faculty member explaining to me that she could never do anything wrong because she once did something wrong when she was 2 and then her mother died. So I felt like I was therapist in chief. There's all sorts of things that come across your lap, your couch, your desk as a woman president, because people really do feel, in good ways and in bad ways, that they can say anything they want to you. Anything they want to you. Example, I graded your speech last night. What'd you give it? Well, it's a member of the class of 1968, and he said, I talked too much about the past. I'm like, okay. 20 yards later, a woman said, you know, I think maybe I shouldn't say this, it's a little too personal, but you might want to be careful how you talk about your children because they may come to resent you. Another 20 yards later, a woman who's also African-American woman with very fair skin, and she has blue eyes, said to me, I'd love to wear my hair the way you wear yours. And I was like, okay. Well, Jerry, are you looking for a hairdresser recommendation? What is this? And she says, but, you know, I'm afraid to. The last time I wore my hair natural, I didn't like the way people treated me. And at this point, so what I'm saying by this is you don't have to be vulnerable. Show yourself to be vulnerable. You will be made human and vulnerable by every single encounter people have with you. So I gathered up my children, this was alumni weekend, and I took one by each hand, and I said, we're going to walk quietly through the trees. We're going to go home, and no one's going to speak to mommy for 20 minutes. So, you know, the vulnerability will come whether you put it out there or not.
I would say that what I heard in that question and what I have heard about women being too vulnerable, I have, I guess, chosen to flip that, to think about authenticity. And for me, vulnerability is not weakness, and it isn't, and it is in the eye of the beholder. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about being vulnerable, I think about being authentic enough with all of the people around, who surround you, and I mean that's an entire campus for presidents, where you are speaking at least as honestly, authentically as you can on every issue. That you are saying, maybe not out loud to thousands of people, but you are being vulnerable enough to say to people, yes, I was nervous about, I was scared about, I wasn't sure about that decision. I needed to consult with other people because that is a healthy, useful process. So vulnerability for me is not going to be an attack word and hasn't been for a long time. I think that is the attack word of the other party often about what they think women will bring, which is authenticity, which is collaboration, which is being smart enough to say when you don't know something and own up to that, and to reach out to people who know more, because there always is. That's where we started, I think, this conversation. So I don't accept that vulnerability is an appropriate word, particularly for women, and I don't accept it when it is applied to me.
You know, when I think of vulnerable, I think of feelings. We always hear people talk about thick skin, and I think not. I think I don't strive to have thick skin. I think being in touch with feelings and kind of the feelings of others as a leader, it helps you to kind of keep your pulse on what's happening and address issues before they fester and that type of thing. So for me, I connect vulnerability with kind of feelings, and I think it's okay. I don't think it's necessarily, a bad thing.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Hori. I'm the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Caltech, and I have a practical question to add on to all the inspiration that you've been offering. As president of the Pod Network in higher education this year, and working with other national organizations, we've sometimes heard the critique that as directors or as middle-level change agents and leaders in our institutions, of which there are so many in many different roles, we sometimes don't capture the arguments that presidents might want and need to hear about our various initiatives and the impact that we're having. And I wonder if you could speak to how your perspective, how your desire for different kinds of evidence and arguments might have changed over the course of your careers as you've gained different vantage points within your institutions.
Everyone thinking?
So, I think it's changed probably more audience by audience than it has and between different positions, different roles. And that trying out arguments and is really important when you are lobbying on Capitol Hill or trying to talk to parents or trying to put a stake in the ground for higher education and writing an op-ed or wherever. And the need for airtight evidence is nothing that's ever been absent. But what I've learned is that the arguments that I make best often are ones that are on behalf, are framed in ways that generally exclude me from them. So, for example, when I talk about the endowment tax, which Pomona is very lucky to have enough funds to be asked by the government to contribute to the country in a different way than we are already doing every day. I go on the Hill and I'll say, well, look, if the American tax code is meant to incentivize individual giving and individual choice, you've just created a disincentive to follow the best. So let's look at the state of Texas. There could be two institutions, one next to each other, each next to each other. You can give $500 million tax-free to the football stadium of one of them, or you can give $500 million tax to biomedical research at the other one of them. Which of these do you wish to incentivize? I don't want to put Pomona in the middle of that. I want to you make it so that it's not about me. And so striving for evidence that doesn't look as if it's putting my institution in this particular place, I think has been really important for people to be willing to hear the arguments that I'm making.
I was thinking about it, and I don't think that it has been as positionally specific and changed. But because I'm a social worker by background, qualitative research and information has always been as powerful as quantitative. And I taught research and statistics as a faculty and very much believe that. So I was sort of puzzling about whether it has changed over my different positions or whether it's audience, but certainly where the value is, which has for me always been inclusive of multiple kinds of data, trying to get the qualitative and systemic parts of descriptions of experiences, in this case, whether it's our students' experience or it's staff experiences. So I was struggling to answer that and then thought maybe it is because I had a different set of values from a professional point long before I thought about ever being an academic administrator.
Joanna, any thoughts?
Actually, I love what you were saying about the qualitative piece, because same thing, I was kind of struggling with the question, but I think, particularly in a higher education realm, that the power of the qualitative piece of it and the experiential piece, as you mentioned, whether that be from students or faculty or staff, I think is a powerful tool in the argument, along with the quantitative piece. Yeah.
But my question is to any of you, how you manage, or if you could offer some counsel or wisdom for big transitions in your career, and whether those transitions were forcibly or transitions that you sought out, if you had words of wisdom or guidance, and of course we know the normal things, seeking out mentorships and going to events like this, but counsel or wisdom about managing difficult career transitions. Either those that you elected and those not on the normal strain, the expected path, but ones that were a little bit different than expected, and what your thoughts and advice on that is.
Yeah, for me, again, you heard my history, but I was a dean for 11 years in the community colleges, and I was a vice president for 5 years before I became president. And honestly, so it's kind of a natural kind of progression to the presidency for me. But honestly, the transition between each of those leadership positions is pretty profound, and particularly moving from vice president to president. I mean, and that's my most recent experience. And I would say, so as a president, as a first-time president, and again, I've been doing it now for over 3 years, I didn't manage as a vice president, I didn't manage every facet of the institution the way that I am now. And so I think I was just very honest and real about what I know and what I don't know, and that you're going to be training me. So for example, one of the biggest surprises, people ask me, like, what's the biggest surprise of being a president? I feel like I'm a facilities manager, because right now we passed 2 bonds and we are under construction and we have multi-million-dollar projects. I was never trained. I sat on, some of the facilities committees and looked at, maintenance and that kind of thing, but I was never kind of trained with that. And so I said, you will be, I told my facilities manager, you will be training me in the realm of facilities. But what I'm, whether it's facilities or instruction or student affairs, it doesn't even quite matter. I think one, yes, acknowledging kind of your strengths and where you need to develop and being open about that. But what I'm finding is that even in the realm of facilities, it still goes back to what we were talking about before. It's about relationships. It's about listening. I'm working right now on a $10 million project for ornamental horticulture, and there's some tension there right now with how this is going to play out. And it's not so much that I know everything about ornamental horticulture. I don't know about the design process and all of the pipes that need to go underground and that kind of thing. But I'm listening to the faculty and what their vision is and how they want that to play out, and I'm navigating then my way through kind of that vision and kind of what our construction and our architects are saying. And so I would just say that you just know that from one transition to the next, there's going to be things that you know and that you don't know, and just to be kind of open and real about that, but still kind of go back to who you are as a leader, and kind of leveraging kind of relationships and kind of what you know to be true to help you through those transitions.
So I had an unnatural transition to your natural
mine were
transition.
natural.
I never wanted to be a president because I didn't see my woman of a certain age, and as a successful dean, never saw people that looked like me in the presidency or acted as I could observe them and with the set of values. But overnight, I was the senior dean on the University of Houston campus and was asked in 3 weeks to become an interim president. Never wanted to be a president. When they told me that they were firing the president, I said, what were the problems? And overnight, I thought, okay, I know what those set of problems are. This is a 9-month stint. That's all it's going to be. She says 24 years later, right? But what it brought into focus for me was, one, that we all have such strong skill sets that aren't in play necessarily every day in the jobs we're currently doing, but moving either out, up, in a lateral move, but that gives us more opportunities, that all of a sudden you realize the skills that you have to bring to the moment. I would also say to you that having been very successful as a dean, I found myself in the first month of a presidency on a campus I had never been on before as an interim, all of a sudden embodying everything about the imposter syndrome in that moment. It can happen to experienced and confident women just in that moment of transition, and then it's all about finding where that strength and support comes from that moves you beyond that imposter to, yes, I do have these skill sets and I can make them work for me in this difficult transition in space.
I would just add, and this in some ways goes back to to an earlier question about advice, but so I was at a HERS Leadership Foundation meeting soon after I'd taken over as president, and there was a woman who was a senior administrator who said, well, how do you know when you're ready to become a president? And I said, ask me in December, and I'll let you know. I think that you can't ever know that you're going to be ready to make that kind of transition until you're in the middle of it. And what the corollary to that is that perhaps one of the worst things that you can do if you have built up a lot of human capital at a particular institution is to hop because you get ticked off about something. So I've talked to a woman who had been an interim provost through 3 presidents. They'd had a lot of leadership change on the campus. And she's like, well, what kind of opportunity should I take? I was like, you're a tenured faculty member. You don't need to hop just because you're irritated that they didn't keep you on as provost. What you need to do is wait to see what opportunity speaks to you and revel in the fact that you have tenure. And you don't have a problem with your narrative either. You had 3 presidents. They wanted something else. So think about when is the right time to transition, and the right time to transition needs to be when the opportunity feels right, not because you're running from something else.
Very true. Any additional questions?
And thank you for all the questions. We have time for one more. Okay.
I have a question. If you could capture your presidency in one word, what would that word be?
I'll go. One came to mind right away, actually. So I'll tell you a story. Interestingly, again, it's been a little over 3 years. A year into my presidency, I had open heart surgery. So random thing where I just had weird heart palpitations. Everybody thought like, well, your job's stressing you out. And I'm like, is it? Oh my God. So what it ended up being, it was something congenital. So I ended up having a bad aortic valve. And it was interesting the way I found out. And they said, I need to have surgery. And I said, I have to wait 2 months for convocation to happen. And so I did. And the very next day I had heart surgery. But my point is that, something like that makes you think about your life, and are you living the life that you want and that's fulfilling? And so that's the word that came to me. So if I could encapsulate it into one word, I would say fulfilling. That it's being the college president, being able to break through those institutional barriers, being able to be in community with one another and bring everyone together with that vision that we're changing lives, guys, and this system that we have right now is not doing it. We have to break through these barriers. And to see like a college community come together with that vision in mind, to me, is fulfilling. So as tiring as it is, and I have one eye of makeup and it's crazy, it's fulfilling.
I just say optimism.
Great. President Haynes?
I'm still stuck
You're
on
still
the one
struggling?
word. I'm going to say 3 words, or 4. The privilege, the privilege to have been able to live my passion.
Good. Well, thank you. Let's thank all these presidents for sharing their words and wisdom with us. I'm going to turn the podium over to 3 of our fellow network members who will share with you the work they completed this past year to survey the membership. This survey was overseen by a committee of the ACE membership and was designed to assess the needs of the Southern California network. Results will be shared at an aggregate and disaggregate level. Now, as a scholar and as researchers, I believe it is important that we articulate terms and definitions because language is important and it matters. It changes and it develops. To that end, we've elected to use the term women to describe the survey respondent sample, as many respondents self-identified as women. As well, we will use the phrase women of color to include historically marginalized communities such as Black, African American, American Indian, Asian American, Hispanic, and Latina women. Given this survey was conducted for and within the confines of the ACE network, we've chosen to use the descriptive terminology reflected by ACE's initiative on advancing women and women of color in leadership roles. We do acknowledge that our choice of terms and note that we want to acknowledge that our choice of terms and note that we are aware other terms and phrases are used in research literature and that these terms may not adequately describe everyone in this room. Indeed, the ACE National Network is currently struggling with ways to be more inclusive, as we all are. So I will turn it over to Cheryl, Judith, and Veronica.
Thank you, Dr. Prado-Olmos. My name is Cheryl Diaz-Landon, and I am a Decision Support Analyst in the Community Engagement Division here at Cal State San Marcos. And I'll go ahead and let my co-presenters introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Stepan-Norris from UC Irvine. I'm the Vice Provost for Academic Planning.
Veronica Galvan, a Department of Psychological Sciences from the University of San Diego.
So as Dr. Prado almost mentioned, the three of us were part of a committee that was formed to develop and analyze this regional networks member survey last year. Today we'll be sharing with you not only the results of the survey, but we'll also be sharing the collaborative process that we engaged in order to develop a survey that would best align with the ACE Women's Network's needs. So at this time, given the theme of As Together We Rise, I would like to invite survey committee members who are in attendance today to please rise and be acknowledged for your contributions towards this effort. Thank you. Thank you. As the person who facilitated this process, I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to work alongside so many members who took time out of their busy schedules in order to develop a survey that would best align with the ACE Women's Network's commitment to advancing women leaders and to inform next steps as to how they could effectively do so. So the initial purpose of the survey was established as twofold. First, we wanted it to act as a needs assessment that would help us understand what type of network offerings could be implemented in order to address the most common barriers to advancement that were reported by our members. The Southern California Network also took an inventory of best practices among other ACE regional networks and recognized that many of them provided professional development opportunities specific to women of color. As such, we set out to understand any barriers that are reported specific to respondents who identify as women of color so that the network could shape future programming accordingly. As we share the results with you, you will see areas where we highlight significant differences that were observed between women of color in comparison to other respondents. In light of the fact that the survey would be administered to women in leadership positions at our member institutions, whether or not they were familiar with the ACE network, we also recognize that the survey would allow an opportunity for the network to collect information on the awareness level of the network as a whole, as well as the member offerings that they provide to the members. Therefore, that would hopefully allow the network to be informed as to how they can continually engage existing members and activate new ones. And in doing so, that would expand their reach and impact across the region of Southern California. And as such, we'll be sharing with you today results on challenges to advancement, as well as results of questions relevant to the regional network's marketing and communication efforts. In the end, the plan is to thoughtfully transform the data you're about to see into meaningful changes that will allow this network to best support its members and, in turn, hopefully contribute to an equitable landscape in higher education throughout Southern California. So this is a snapshot of our 16-member survey committee. As you can see, we had women representatives from all different geographical areas throughout Southern California. They also represent different roles at their institutions, whether that's faculty, staff, or administrators. And they also represent different institution types, from 2 years to 4-year colleges to private to public universities. And we even had the redheaded Cuban representation with Regina in there. So in all seriousness, we were really excited to have such diverse representation in our survey committee as we strove to develop an instrument that would best capture the diverse perspectives of our membership base. In the end, as I said, we want to make sure that this survey is going to be meaningful for the network and lead to next steps that will help to inform how our members can best be served through them. So we began the collaborative process of developing the survey in June of 2017, and just prior to then, the National ACE Women's Network had their 2017 Moving the Needle Summit. During that summit, they shared out national research regarding challenges to advancement typically faced by women in higher education. Informed by that research, I developed an initial set of survey questions, which was shared with the survey committee, who participated in a series of virtual meetings to further refine the questions. We then engaged in a pilot survey period, and a select group of women were invited to take the survey by our survey committee members. And through that pilot, we asked for feedback regarding the survey questions themselves, in addition to the length and format of the survey. Once pilot survey results were returned, the survey committee participated in a second iteration of virtual meetings, and from there, we created the final set of questions that went out to the larger membership base. The administration dates of the survey were between October 31st of 2017 through January 25th of 2018. The survey was developed in Qualtrics, and we shared an online link with ACE institutional representatives at our member institutions. We requested that they then share that out with women in leadership positions at their respective campuses. And in the end, the invitations for the first ever regional network survey were sent to over 3,600 recipients, and we received back responses from over 400 of them, resulting in an 11% response rate. And now I'm going to turn it over to Judy to tell us a little bit more about who responded and some of the results of the challenges to advancement questions that we asked.
Thanks, Cheryl. So what does our respondent pool look like, given that our aim was to reach as many Southern California ACE women members? And we'll talk in a few minutes about a little bit of a confusion around the actual definition of who is a member of the ACE network, and that's going to be a task that we're going to have to address in the future. So looking at the respondent profile here, we see that in terms of the role, 46% of the respondents identify as faculty members, 42% as administrators, and 21% as staff, with a small 3% other. In terms of years in higher education, we see that a whopping proportion has been in higher education between 10 and 20 years. So, and the next most common response was 20 plus years. So we have a group of very well experienced members in higher education. When it comes to institutional affiliations, we see that four-year publics is the most commonly mentioned affiliation with 74%, followed by four-year privates at 22%, and two-year publics at 1%, and a small percentage of other. With regard to racial ethnic identification, the largest proportion, 63%, identify as white, 13% as Asian, 8% as Latina Hispanic, 4% African American, 3% two or more races, 1% Pacific Islander, 5% prefer not to respond, and 2% other. And then finally, with regard to the awareness of the ACE network, we see that 36%, so that most of the people that answered the survey didn't even know what the ACE network was. And you can say that's a pretty good way to actually spread the word, what ACE network is trying to do and what they're asking their potential members and their members what it is that they need. Do you have the clicker to go to the next slide? Okay, so now let's turn to the survey results. So what did people say were the biggest challenges for them in higher education? So the question that was put to them is, in your experience, what are the biggest challenges regarding advancement in higher education? And they were allowed to select up to 3 topics. And you can see that by far the most commonly cited issue or obstacle in women's advancement in higher education is work-life balance. I mean, that's something that we heard many times in the earlier presentations. It's something that women, not only inside higher education, but also outside of higher education, face on a daily basis. That's a very difficult problem, and we're going to have to figure out what is the way to help women figure out what are maybe some good strategies, some good tactics, maybe mentoring, maybe we'll get to that in a few minutes, about how we might disseminate conversations or disseminate information and encourage conversations maybe between more senior women and more junior women to sort of let, people who've been through this, and you can see by the last slide, there's lots of women in this network that have been there for quite a while, can maybe depart some ideas to the younger members of our community. Next most important obstacle mentioned is self-advocacy. 36% had troubles figuring out, how do I advocate for myself in terms of my next step in my career? The next one is called unwritten rules. That is, people were trying to struggle. How do you figure out what's the lay of the land? What's the way that I position myself, maybe on my campus or maybe also in the larger academic endeavor to advance myself in my career? The fourth most cited is implicit bias. 34% listed implicit bias. But importantly here, there is a significant difference with regard to our white respondents versus others. So, well, with regard to this one, it's African American and Latina respondents tended to view implicit bias as a significantly more prominent challenge in their life. So 49% of African American and Latina women did cite that as an important obstacle, whereas 33% of white women, or other women, mentioned that as an important obstacle. And then next, so you can see those are the ones that sort of stand out as the getting the lion's share of responses. And then we start to get to the ones that are a little bit less important in terms of the number of people that are mentioning them. Finding a mentor. Again, we talked about that this morning. Finding a mentor might be difficult if it's on the person to take the initiative to go out there and say, who is it that I would like to advise me on things, and not even knowing exactly what those things might be. So finding a mentor might be a good role for an institution like a network like ACE to help its members solve. Leadership skills, 14.5% said it's difficult to figure out how do I acquire these things that are needed in a strong leader. Lacking networks, 14% of the respondents mentioned that there was not enough places where they can get together with other, with colleagues in other institutions and maybe even within their own to create a sort of supportive network system. 12.8% listed lack of self-confidence, or actually figuring out how do I get beyond lacking the self-confidence. We heard a little bit about that today too, you know, sort of this idea that is kind of corollary with the imposter syndrome. How do we get over and recognize ourselves as capable and able and making ourselves willing to step into those next positions. Explicit bias was mentioned by almost 13%. And the glass ceiling by almost 12%. And again, on the glass ceiling, we have a finding that white respondents were viewing this as a more important challenge than others, with 15% of white respondents listing it and 8% of women of color listing it. Time to tenure is important. It was listed by 8%, and communication skills by almost 7%. The next question we asked is, if you are familiar with the ACE network and its programs, rate the network on its success at addressing these issues that you've just listed. So you'll notice that our N, in this case, moves from 403 that answered the full survey to only 152 that answered this part. These are the people that already know about the ACE network. All right, so the code here is like a signal. Green is go, good. Yellow is a little bit not so good, and red is we're probably not doing as well as we want to be doing. So you might notice that the green are concentrated down on the lower end. Now, we're not sure what this means, but maybe it means that the ACE network has already been helping people do these, and so they don't list them anymore. That could be one interpretation. I think that is testable, which we haven't done yet. But nevertheless, the ACE network is doing well on training the leadership skill techniques that are necessary for these kinds of jobs, giving people self-confidence, figuring out how to break that glass ceiling, which we're all wearing on our lapels, hopefully. That was a little gift for you on your table, and the communication skills. All right, but again, the obstacles that are listed most commonly are the ones where the rankings are a little bit lower. So it's a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most effective, and we see that the ones at the top get the 2.5 range. So what are some of the things that can be done by the network that can help women address these obstacles? All right, so then let's go on to the next one. The next one is about how we can what are the kinds of formats that we can use to help the network address these issues? So here the question was, how would you rate the importance of each of the following potential member benefits that ACE has? So not at all being important being 1, and extremely important being 5. And the single most, or the style that got the biggest applause here is the mentoring program. So most people are saying, we would like to have a mentoring program. It ranks 4.15 out of 5. So Again, we heard a lot of the discussion this morning about the importance of mentoring. I'm taking this to mean that women are finding it hard to identify who those mentors are. So if a program comes along and puts women together and says, here you are, let's talk about our experiences and who can help whom, and find mentors for people, maybe not that one-on-one matching that was mentioned this morning is maybe not so, it's like blind date. Maybe we do groups, or maybe we do some other kind of program that will help people find the right mentors for the things that they are working on right now. So networking events was the second highest ranked, and tying with topical workshops. So the networking events, I sort of like what we had last night, a chance to get together with women leaders from around the area and build up those supportive networks. Topical workshops might address some of the important things that we saw were important barriers on the other slide, like developing self-advocacy, where we could advocate for each other, where we could learn about unwritten rules of academia. Maybe people can have local groups that look about how do you understand the unwritten rules about your institution that you're at, about implicit bias. Maybe some of these could be online programs or whatever. This is what we need brainstorming around. How do we do that? How do we deliver these kinds of things to the members? Next was regional meetings, followed by member newsletters and awards programs. Awards programs was ranked 2.83 overall, but again, here's a significant difference between women of color who viewed them as significantly more important. They ranked them as 3.04 versus 2.73, but importantly, both of them put the ranking the same. They both rank that as at the low end of the scale versus the other ones. Okay, so now we're going to have a chance to listen to Veronica, who's going to talk about communications.
Okay, thank you, Judy. So the third major section on the survey focused on marketing and communication. There were 3 questions on this topic. The first question you can see here: how did you first learn about the ACE Southern California Women's Network? And the majority of people, respondents, said this was through word of mouth, so that's 70%. Of that group, primarily people learned about ACE through colleagues at their home institution. 23% also learned about it through their employer, and then another 3% through colleagues at another institution. The second most common way of learning about ACE, Southern California Women's Network, was through ACE correspondence, through emails and things like that. The third most common method was through an external conference. And then finally, there was a small percentage of respondents who learned about ACE through external websites. So for the second and third question, the second question was, on what forms of social media would you be interested in connecting with ACE? So the majority of respondents, 43%, expressed an interest of connecting with ACE through LinkedIn. This was followed in second place by Facebook at 29%. In third place, the third most common response is no thank you, no social media. And then this was followed in fourth and fifth place by Twitter and Instagram. And so the third and final question was basically, what types of information would you be most interested in receiving from ACE? And so most respondents, 61%, said they would appreciate information about career development. And so this could span a number of categories that Judy had mentioned. This could be self-advocacy, negotiation skills, leadership skills, and related concepts. The second item that respondents expressed an interest in learning more about was details on upcoming meetings and events. So an interest in keeping engaged with the ACE network. The third most common response was information about current research and trends. So what does the current research say about leadership skills or work-life balance and related topics? So the fourth and fifth most common responses were basically tied. They were both at 43%. The fourth one was information about campus models and events. So how do other institutions support their women in leadership? And so again, this fifth one was basically tied. Respondents were interested in job announcements. And so basically, if we don't support our women in leadership, they will be looking for jobs elsewhere, right? And then the final one was information about publications and periodicals. Okay. And so after the data collection was completed, the survey committee met to discuss results and also create a list of recommendations and next steps. So the first recommendation was to modify current program benefits to specifically address top challenges to advancement. As Judy mentioned, there was a variety of challenges that respondents said that they face. And so there's a perception that ACE is meeting some of those challenges better than others. And so if we can modify program benefits, perhaps we can meet more of those challenges. The second recommendation was to organize smaller workshops. And again, this may be another method to meet those challenges. And so perhaps a form of mentoring or learning about self-advocacy and things like that. The third recommendation was to launch a membership campaign and maintain consistent communication because, again, members are interested in learning more about ACE benefits and also upcoming events. The fourth recommendation was to commission a membership committee to create a common set of qualifications for ACE membership. And this actually was an interesting question that we wrestled with because the definition of who is a woman in leadership, this actually varied amongst different individual ACE representatives. So at one institution, it may have just have been faculty administrators who received the surveys, but other institutions, it may have been faculty, staff, and administrators. So if we can clarify, who is a member of ACE, then we could do a better job of targeting programs to that particular group. And then the final recommendation, and as Cheryl mentioned, this is our first survey of ACE Southern California members, is to continue collecting input from members to stay informed on the challenges they face, but also whether or not ACE is making progress on helping them face those challenges. So the next part of our program is a discussion in groups where we will talk about these results and also the recommendations. ACE is very interested in your thoughts on both sets, both the results and the recommendations. So that concludes our portion of the program, and we thank you very much for your time and for your attention.
So please continue with your lunches. We thought that working through lunch was a good idea, so you can all get on the freeway and pray that the traffic gods smile upon you. Before I begin this next segment of table discussions, I feel compelled to let you all know that I am not really a red-headed Cuban. I am Cuban, but moving right along, my name is Regina Eisenbach. I'm Dean of Academic Programs here, and I've been at Cal State San Marcos for 28 years. It has been my privilege to serve this year with someone that you know very well, our regional coordinator, Sarah Villarreal, who's hiding against the wall in the back. So we thought today would be a great opportunity to tap into the collective wisdom in this room to get your feedback on these issues that were identified in the survey results that were just presented. Especially given the transition to a new presidential sponsor, we really want to know how the ACE Regional Network can best serve its members. So for this next segment, I ask, while you eat, that you discuss the future of the network at your tables. You'll find a pad of paper by the flowers at your table and some pens. We ask that you designate one person as a scribe to capture your discussion, as we'll be turning over all of those notes to President Coley, our next sponsor. So I'll discuss the prompts in just a moment. You'll have 20 minutes at your tables to engage in this discussion, and then we'll just ask for volunteers to share some insights. Obviously, with a crowd of this size, we don't have time to go table by table.
So let's spend a minute just going over the 3 prompts that we're going to ask you to discuss. So the first is a definitional issue. So really the question here is, who does this organization serve, and who should the organization serve, if those are different things? And I know that this is a lot to unpack. We know that the ACE network has a definition that we serve all women in leadership positions at Southern California institutions of higher education. The issue, though, then is each campus takes that definition and translates it perhaps in a different way. So the main question is whether this is an issue that the network should address. Should the network be more inclusive? There's been some conversation around men. Anybody left, or did we scare them all off? So what role would men have in an organization like ours? Or what if someone in the room doesn't identify simply as a woman? So how do we address the variety of both gender identification issues and who we serve? Second question is, how do we address the members' desire for this skill building, as was mentioned in the survey? So we know that we have events that have been sponsored by the network, such as this forum, annual meetings, and then campuses have their own events. So given the survey results, how do we engage in skill building for members around the issues of importance that have been identified? So this one really gets at the format of events to deal with these important issues. The third question is, what one accomplishment would you like the network to achieve in the next year? So this is the visioning and looking forward part. So if you could think of, as concrete as possible, what sorts of things would you like the network to really dig in on and focus for the next year? So your wish for the future. So I ask now that you please turn to your table mates. Make sure that one person is capturing all of your ideas, and I will call time in 20 minutes so that we can hear from a few of your tables. Hello, everyone. So I know that 15 minutes doesn't even begin to scratch the surface on these topics, but in the interest of time, just want to get some feedback from a few of you, get some volunteers to share table responses. And so we'll start with question number 1. If we can have a volunteer or two to share some thoughts on prompt number 1 with us, we'll get a microphone to you. And it's okay to talk with food in your mouth. I give you permission.
Okay, Regina, I'll start.
Okay.
We talked about, in terms of who this serves, we were talking about the higher education part of that definition. So community colleges, there aren't a whole lot of community college folks here today. So how do we ensure the word is getting out, that the network is getting out to all the community college folks? We also talked about a lot of what you hear is focused on academics, maybe on progressions to deans and provosts and presidents and those sorts of pathways. But how are the people that are here that are not in that academic category, how are we serving them? So if they're budget officers, if they're a director of some other office, how are they being served, and how can we continue to help serve them? And we also then talked about students. Should more students be included in this as we're developing leadership pipelines, starting with students? So we really talked about maybe having tracks to the conference, where you might have one that's focused on staff lines, one's focused on faculty lines, or student lines, or something like that.
So be more mindful of different constituents and broaden perhaps the conference or different activities. That's great. Thank you. Any others on question number 1? I'm going to call out Tara because she had a good one. Is she still over there? Oh, Kendra, you've got something? Great. Microphone's headed your way.
I have power now. So we just wanted to say that for women, quote unquote women, we recognize that as a problematic term, and so we wanted to make sure that our network would say women who identify, people who identify as women.
That's great.
As opposed to us imposing some sort of arbitrary definition upon others.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the question that we got asked was, we got somebody, go ahead. Yes, Jen, thanks.
Hi. So one of the things that isn't in the question but that you said was women in leadership positions in higher education. And it's partly because this is on our campus, but I've always offered it to anyone in our organization on campus that wanted to come, because I believe that people can lead from everywhere in the organization. And so we do have staff that are here that may not be in formal positions of leadership. And do they see themselves here? And if we're not focused on that, then how are we growing the pipeline of women that are setting these goals and moving forward in higher education leadership positions? And so we did talk about that at our table.
So women leaders and aspiring leaders. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Got one more over here. There you are.
We don't have an institutional representative, and I've been wondering how we get an institutional representative, and how can this network serve my community college so that I can share the information with my constituents. So that's something I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's a great point. So having an institutional representative as a point person for the campus, for all types of campuses, to make sure that we're more inclusive. All right, moving on to question number 2. Hands-on skill building format, what should we be thinking about for the future?
Hi, I'm Konani Martinez from Cal State San Marcos. One of the sort of funnier points we had here was that maybe we should learn from men on how not to try to do it all. And also some trainings for men on having them pick up some of the slack.
That's great. In terms of smaller, so this conference is one thing. Jenny's table had the idea of having tracks within the conference. Perhaps that's a way to get more hands-on skill building. Any other ideas that came up at your tables? Yes.
We thought that it might be good, since we're all here and we came different distances, it might be a good idea to have maybe a workshop that would be either the afternoon before or the afternoon after this major part of the presentations. Okay. And some ideas for workshops, of course, are mentors, navigating politics at your institution, and when to react, how to react when it comes to conflict mediation.
Great ideas, thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, we'll move on. Question number 3 then. Accomplishments or achievements in the next year. What would you like to see the network do for you?
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm from Cal State San Marcos. And our group discussed the value of broadening diversity at the event, gender diversity in particular, so that we can start to bridge those gaps in the events and then kind of reduce the stress of reaching out in our work environments to address issues and make it a more commonplace discussion that we can have with men in higher ed. So one of the comments that Pat Stahl made last night about the discussion President Haynes made about she and the other 3 current presidents reached out to Chancellor White and said, this is not okay. We there's only 4 of us in this CSU, and we want to have more women representation in presidencies in the CSU. And he championed a lot of that effort in making sure that happens. So I think we need to remember that there are ways to empower ourselves as women or people who identify as women, but also we need to find allies in men as well. So.
And bring them in. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Yes, one up front.
Oh, hello. Maruth Figueroa from Cal State Dominguez Hills. Our table talked about a mentoring program, whether it's formal or informal, kind of in response to the survey, and also in response to kind of our own experiences.
Yeah, that comes up over and over again. So yes, very, very point well taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Iris Levine from Cal Poly Pomona. I'd like us to move away from the thought of managing work-life balance and instead to talk about valuing work-life balance, and instead of women trying to fit into the mold that the men have set forth for all so many years of what it really means to have a work-life balance or not, for us to create and really have and value our own type of work-life balance.
Redefine and own the
Yes.
term. Yeah. Yep. Other thoughts?
Good afternoon. Odessa Downing from Cal Poly Pomona. One of the responses at our table was to see if we could grow the conference. I know there's about 300 in attendance today. To see if we can grow the conference and maybe have it twice a year. That way we can open it up to maybe students, excuse me, maybe even neighboring states, as we're talking about mentoring and networking. Maybe it'd be beneficial to invite members of the K-12 community as well.
Oh, very good. Yes.
Hi, Kim Norman from Cal State Fullerton. Our table is also really struck by the role of mentoring, and one of the things we thought the network could achieve this year is to help us by compiling or providing resources on different models of mentoring, because we know it'll look different on the different campuses, but that might be a role that the network could play.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any final thoughts? Well, all I can say is to be continued. You will hear a lot more about and from the network in upcoming months and in the next year as we transition to new leadership. Thank you all very much for your time. And after this robust discussion and all of this wonderful feedback, I'm turning it back to Patricia for the final portion of today's program.
Thank you, Regina, and thank you, everyone, for that discussion. I'm confident that President Coley will appreciate everything that we've gathered together. So please make sure that the pads stay on the table, because we will be collecting all the notes and presenting those to President Coley. Okay, so we are heading towards the end. We are mindful of the time and Friday afternoon traffic. But before we wrap it up, we do need we're in a transition time. Let me stop. We're in a transition time, and we're moving from one presidential sponsor to the next. So we'd like to take a few moments to celebrate the achievements of this network and speak to its power and purpose. So I invite all of you, any of you, to think about what your experience has been with the network, either this year or in previous years, and share your thoughts on that subject. And I'll go ahead and get us started. I have to say, so I've been at Cal State San Marcos for over 20 years, and I came as a faculty member and had opportunities to do different kinds of things. And as a faculty member, I was here when President Haynes arrived. And for a couple of years, I would hear about this network. And it was Friday afternoons, and they were doing something over off in one of the rooms in the McMahon House, and I really didn't know what it was or who it involved. And slowly but surely, information about supporting leadership, supporting women who were aspiring to do these different things made its way across the campus. And then my involvement slowly grew over time. And I would have to say that from those, our McMahon House is a beautiful place, and I don't know if any of you were ever at one of the forums that we had in the McMahon House. Does anybody here remember those? Right? Okay, this is what, like 5 times the size of those gatherings? We had to find a bigger space. Thankfully, we built the USU and we had a bigger space on campus, because otherwise we would have been limited. And I think that's what the network has been to me, kind of moving beyond the limits. It is limitless in what we can do individually and what we can do together. And that's the way my president thinks. Why put limits on something? Why can't we do this? Why shouldn't we? If this is the focus of our campuses, if we are here for equity, if we are here for creating access and seeing students learn and achieve, then why not? Let's be limitless in our thinking and work towards those ends. So for me, this network has embodied some of those thoughts and my own experiences in serving all of you in the role that I play here in preparing, supporting my team to prepare this, and serving as MC. It has been a privilege and an honor. So with that, we do again have our microphones for anyone who would like to share their experiences with the AC Network under the leadership and guidance of President Karen Haynes.
How about this? Okay. As I said before, I'm provost at Bakersfield, but when I first came to this, I was associate provost at San Bernardino. So I think I was here at the very first one. I've been coming to these for years. And a couple of thoughts come to mind. When I went back to San Bernardino after these, I invited President Haynes up, and she came up and was our keynote speaker, and we did sort of a regional one just on our campus to inspire our campus. And I will tell you, at that time, I gave the data for the CSU, and it was 4 women presidents, but I also gave the data for that campus. And at San Bernardino, and I think it was 45 years at that point, there were only 2 women that had ever been vice president. They have 5 vice presidents. And over 45 years, only 2 women in advancement had been VPs of advancement. And so I put those data up specifically for the campus to think about where we needed to go. We now have a provost in our system that's at the San Bernardino campus, and she's a woman at San Bernardino, Sherry. So we make progress. And I say that because this network is so broad, and the tentacles that have gone out under your leadership and your vision has just touched all of us. And I would say that in the CSU specifically, but I also see it in the community colleges. Fireside Chats always had somebody who was from one of your local community college chancellor or presidents. So I do see it very broad, how the reach has gone out. And the other thing that struck me about last night is, as I looked at the 9 of the 12, but all 12 of the women presidents, I think in each one of them, I could see a thread of Karen Haynes in them, where she had mentored this one here. This one had gone to her and asked her, how do I interview for a presidency? She has given advice to each of the others that were up there as presidents. She's given advice to me. And so that's another reach that she's had. She personally really takes it serious to mentor women in all of their roles. So it's been very impactful, all of your years here. Thank you very much.
So I was a young professional. Prior to working at MiraCosta College, I worked at Cal State San Marcos for 16 years. And I had the opportunity, because I heard word of mouth about the ACE events, to join in one of the luncheons. And I would go and I would listen to Dr. Haynes talk and give her speech and talk and inspire women. And I sat and I observed and I admired and I listened. And we may have had a few awkward moments because I was tongue-tied when I went to her. I was a young professional and I looked up to her. And I decided one day, after hearing all of the comments, that I needed to do more than just listen. I needed a mentor. And I needed I wanted her. And so I sat down one night and I wrote a letter to her and I asked her if she would be my mentor. And that was pretty cocky, quite honestly, when I did it. And I wasn't sure what she would say, but she wrote back in her gracious way and said, yes, I will be happy to be your mentor and let's have lunch. And so we went to her office and had lunch. And she sat and I, probably rambled on. And she looked at me and she said, I want you to think about being the ACE coordinator for Southern California. And I was shell-shocked that she saw in me the potential to lead when I was a director at the time. And so we began the process of thinking about what we wanted the network to be. And we decided there were times where we would meet in her office and she would, before I even got back to my desk, had written me a thank you note for the work that I was doing. There were times where if I was in the paper, she would cut out she would cut the article out and send it to me. And it was that thoughtfulness and compassion and grace in the midst of all that she was facing that really resonated with me. And one day we were there and I said, I think we should start this forum. And she said, absolutely. And she has taken this forum from what, as folks have said, at the McMahon House with 65 women, and we were worried about whether we were going to get that number, to this wonderful event today. And as I ended my time as the coordinator, I gave to you a lighthouse. And the lighthouse for me symbolized that it is a new professional, and it was foggy and unclear, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do or wanted to be, that you cleared the path for me to show me my potential and who I was. And it's through this forum and the network that you are leaving a legacy and making an impact on women's lives. And not only changing individual lives, you are changing systems. And you are putting you're putting action to your words about the value of women in leadership. And for that, I thank you. I thank you for committing to this work and being an inspiration to all of us. I look forward to celebrating you over the next 8 months. And I just want to say, too, to Sarah Villarreal, who is probably running around, she has taken this forum to amazing places. You are a powerful, dynamic woman, and we are all grateful for your work and sacrifice on behalf of the network.
It is a pleasure to thank you for the many years that we've known each other. Since I was part of the selection committee, I've admired your passion for social justice and for listening to everyone, students, faculty, staff, administrators, campus visitors. For me, it has been a truly pleasure, and I'm honored to have this opportunity to thank you. One of the initiatives that I will always treasure is the Hispanic Surveying Institution. I came to you with a community member and I said to you, Dr. Haynes, it's time. And you said, okay, tell me what you have. And you listened to our call for submitting the proposal for this campus initiative. And we did it, and it was because of your leadership and vision. So thank you very much. Another thing that I truly respect is whenever you get a message, you respond to it right away. And I wonder, how can she do this? She's so busy. She's all outside the campus, inside the campus, you reply. And I thank you for that. I will miss you, and I wish you the best.
Any other comments before we move on? So, hang on.
So to end today, on behalf of the network, we wanted to present President Haynes with a token of our appreciation. So President Haynes. So the plaque says, "In gratitude for your leadership of the Southern California ACE Women's Network, 2005 to 2018."
And along with the gift, we have a card that reads, "Creativity is a lot like looking at the world through a kaleidoscope. You look at a set of elements, the same ones everyone else sees, but then reassemble those floating bits and pieces into an enticing new possibility." Rosabeth Moss Cantor. Thank you for reviving the network and creating new possibilities for us all.
I'm going to call it a technology moment, but thank you all for being here today. This network has been an important part of my life for many years. I launched it in Texas in the 1990s and helped revive this one. While I will be retiring at the end of June, I look forward to continuing to be part of events like this and certainly to continue to support women. Before I complete the handoff of my presidential sponsor responsibilities, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank Sarah Villarreal for her service as our Southern California Regional Coordinator for the past 5 years. Sarah, would you join me now up here? Over here. Sarah has been a tireless advocate for the ACE Women's Network, has played a critical role in the success of our Southern California chapter. I have personally enjoyed getting to know Sarah better. Her balance of work, family, pursuing her doctorate, and fun, and it has been a pleasure to watch her continuously learn, grow, and contribute to Cal State San Marcos and everything that she touches. And to call her one of CSUSM's many, many strong, smart, and bold women leaders. Sarah, please accept this gift. Whoops. Please accept this gift in appreciation of your dedication and work on behalf of the ACE Women's Network of Southern California for the past 5 years. And, oh, I can't read it. I didn't bring my glasses up. Would you like to do? Sorry, and a plaque that I can't read.
This is presented to Sarah Villarreal with deep appreciation for your outstanding leadership, ACE Southern California Regional Coordinator 2013 to 2018, President Karen S. Haynes. And then there's a quote. It says, "A leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be." And that's Rosalind Carter, former First Lady. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Many of us have pushed the glass ceiling, now I lost it. Many of us have pushed the glass ceiling higher. We have persevered. We may have fallen back, we have gotten up again. We have proven that women do well in leadership positions and that leadership matters. May it continue to be our collective commitment to open as many doors, reduce as many barriers, and make it easier for more and more women to succeed. Together, we are stronger than any glass ceiling. Thank you.